Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Motogp Xtra podcast. The last round of the 2023 season. It's gone by in a flash, just like last year. I can't believe we're actually already at the end of our second season of doing this podcast. It is quite surprising. Probably not going to be the last one of the year, though. Probably will end up doing some in the preseason, though. But I'm Rhys, and joining me as always to discuss the events of this final round of the 2023 season is my co-host Dill. Now, of course, 2 championships already sealed. There was still one to go, and of course we will talk about that one quite a bit when we get into the MotoGP class. But even still, with Moto2 and Moto3, there was play to play for in terms of other championship positions and just overall race positions. So we'll get straight into the Moto3 class. Now, Colin Vaya, another pole position for him, but Sunday didn't quite start off in the best way, did it, Dill?
No, unfortunately for him, he had a sighting lap crash on the way to the grid. Horrible corner entry, cold tyre, high side landed on his head, probably scuffed up his helmet. In fairness, got it back to the start line, got it back and got everything sorted and did make the start and had an overall good race considering, but it was literally it was the start of what are things to come for the whole day on Sunday in Valencia. It was just a day of crashes, cold tyres, Sunday was a bit miserable in many ways just because of us going to Valencia at such a late part of the year. Like today is the 26th of November. I think usually the 11th to 9th to 10th is usually like when we finish, so we're good kind of roughly 2 weeks out from where we're normally at. So even then we're pushing the limits whether we should be even riding in Valencia with the temperatures, but today really showed that, and that was a nasty little crash for Colin. Thankfully he bounced back and was okay. I think the fact he was starting for pole, it was probably the extra motivation. He had to get back. He had to make sure he made the grid, but it wasn't great to start off our days racing with that.
No, it wasn't at all. And like you say, of course, 26th of November, this is the latest finish we've ever had in the World Championships since it started. Even 2020, which of course had a later finish because it started later, was still earlier than this. I think it was a week or two before. So this has been the latest finish, the coldest probably it's ever going to be when we go to Valencia. Hopefully. Actually, I mean, I suppose we have the calendar already, but I hope it's not this late next year, but I have a feeling that probably will be, because they're trying to ram even more rounds in next year, and you have to have some space between them, so I'd imagine this could be an issue again next year. Now, I do want to pass another point to you about this. Sighting lap crashes, not something we see that often at all, but this season seems to be happening quite a lot. We've had quite a few happen in Moto3, had a couple in Moto2. To be fair, I don't think we've really had them in MotoGP so much, but do you think there's a specific reason why this is happening? Because it does seem rather strange. Obviously, we had Jake Dixon crashing on a sighting lap back in Austin. I think Josh Watley did as well. We had a few go down at Phillip Island, although at least, to be fair, that was wet, so that was a bit different. And that was Ivea down here again. Seems quite strange since it's not something that we generally see throughout the years.
It's strange that over the years, you see the odd one. Ben Spees, Indianapolis is one that comes to mind. He crashed on a sighting lap. You had Casey who crashed on a warm-up lap back in Valencia in 2010. Rossi crashed on a lap to the grid in Mugello in 2001, I'm going to say, in the rain. It happens, but this year there's nearly 5 of them that's happened, and we've had warm-up lap crashes, we've had sighting lap crashes. I don't think there's one point because the fact it's happened in Moto 2 and Moto 3. The only, I suppose, kind of middle ground there is the Dunlop rubber. So maybe, historically, Dunlops have been tyres that could probably do double race distance on one set of tyres. They don't really wear out. Example is Sam Lowe's in Qatar, fastest lap of the race on his final lap of the race. That kind of just shows that the limiting factor to going quick was more the fuel load in that race and not the tyre temps, not tyre wear. So it shows maybe that because they're so durable tyres that if you're not on the ball on the outlap, you're not really generating heat. Or maybe if you're trying to generate heat too quickly, you could have these moments and these crashes. That's kind of the only thing I can think of is that these Dunlop tires they're just so good at doing what they do and not wearing and be basically being relatively consistent that they can be a bit tricky to get them operated and switch them on. So I'd say that's probably the only thing. But definitely this year has been, like we've seen a Moto 2 champion crash in Phillip Island, and no, that was a wet one, but and cold temperatures, so that's a bit more normal because we've had them over the years. Like for example, the Rossi one in Magellan, that was a proper cold, wet day. Like so, you can have them mistakes, but like Dixon crashing in 25-degree heat in Texas, Josh Watley crashing in Texas on the outer lap. We've had many different scenarios, so it's not like it's extreme heat, extreme cold. It's probably maybe the Dunlop rubber, and of course we have our final weekend of Dunlops in MotoGP and overall. So maybe we won't see it next year. It'll be something to look out for, definitely.
Yep. So Dill, if anything happens next year, if there's any something like crashes, Dill was wrong. He says it's all down to the Dunlop tyres with those Pirellis next year. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well, because the Michelins are known for being, well, they're known for a lot of things, but they're known for being pretty good. Like especially in the wet tyres are quite good. But I think they're pretty grippy. They're very grippy tyres. So I think straight out of the box, they're probably not too bad. MotoGP bikes as well with the carbon brakes. You probably have to brake harder in the pit lane to heat up your brakes anyway, so you're probably heating up the tyres a little bit. So it could be just little things like that. Obviously, as well, something we didn't mention was Moto3 and Moto2 riders obviously less experienced, and younger riders could have probably more likely to make mistakes. So that could be why. But it does seem strange that has been a pattern. And again, before the race even started, there was a bit of drama. But actually, onto the race itself now. A strange one, I think it's safe to say. Not quite the kind of race you'd expect to see in Moto 3 because people were struggling to pass. We had obviously a bit of a breakaway group, which is not too unusual. We do see that quite often now, but just a few riders pulling away at the front. Not that much overtaking, to be honest. They were pretty line astern, weren't they, for the start of the race still?
We were pretty tight. I think we started out with 9, then it went to 7, and then it went to 5, and that was kind of the 5 that was going for the podium and the win. And it was tidy for the most part until I believe Dennis Anchu was overtaken quite aggressively by Alonso into the final corner, pushed him right off the track. And then I was thinking, oh no, this is going to spark World War III here because it's a difficult track to overtake. The two of them are very hot-headed. The only thing was Dennis Anchu had a big crash on Friday afternoon, so he was feeling a bit worse for wear, so he kind of faded through the race. So I don't think he had the overall, maybe the speed to kind of get back and wrestle as much as you normally would. But it was one of those races you were kind of expecting kind of nice, calm, keeping it calm, and then you're expecting someone to just throw a spanner into it and throw everything up into the air. And it never really came. It got a bit more aggressive, and there was mistakes from Vire and stuff towards the end. And again, can't really blame him after such a horrible crash on a siding lap. So, but it was just one of those races where even in Moto 3, you were like, Jesus, it's not going to be easy to make a pass here. You kind of had maybe 3 or 4 braking zones that you could kind of get a move done, but nothing was as simple as like Qatar, where like the overtakes were a lot more straightforward, and you can kind of pick out easily 4 places where on a Moto 3 bike you get to slipstream and you kind of just level them and that's the move done. Whereas it felt like in Moto 3 and in all classes, you're going over your limit and you're making a pass is a risk. And we saw a crash early on from Artigas. Well, Artigas didn't crash, but he took out I think 2 other riders. It was Vicente Perez and Diego Moreira. Now, he got a double long lap penalty. Now, the one issue I have with that is we don't see him at the start of the shot, so you don't know if he has a moment with someone else in the brakes. You just see like an inner corner shot where he just comes in and collects riders. So I felt maybe I'd imagine race direction and this year it's had more cameras than the public, so the penalty was probably correct. But back to the battle at the front, it was very, very much just waiting for other people's mistakes, and that's kind of how the race was won, because that's how Vare lost the lead. And in the end, it was a difficult race to kind of predict and very difficult to overtake, which is not a usual part of the Moto 3 class.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that you mentioned that crash that happened on the first lap, something I kind of just glossed over there. I kind of forgot to mention it. Yeah, obviously Artigas skiffling out Moreira and Vicente Perez, and I think Holgado got hung out to dry by them as well. I think it put him right to the back, so he actually had quite a good race. Little shout out to him. He managed to carve back through after what's been a solid season for him, but definitely sort of dropped off towards the end. Well, for the second half of the season was quite bad, but saying it's the second season in the class, I'm sure he wouldn't be too disappointed. He could try and bounce back for the next one. But we had that crash. Obviously, so we don't know if he had a moment coming in. Like you said, the stewards probably have more cameras, but they probably don't care because generally they still penalise you anyway for that. We've seen crashes in the past where people have got like neutrals on the way into the corners, Lowe's and Chantra and Lowe's, the two different incidents there. I think they both got penalties for those incidents. So I think, to be honest, most of the time, if you skiffle out riders, they usually just give you a penalty, regardless of whether you'd already lost control of the bike, because I guess ultimately it's still a mistake, although I see what you mean, it probably is a bit harsh, but we don't know. He probably didn't have a moment, he probably did just get it wrong, getting too hot, but yeah, we obviously don't know exactly what happened. It's not like Artigas is, not done things like that a little bit before. He sometimes is a bit aggressive with things, so yeah, but it's not completely out of character. Actually, whilst talking about Artigas, obviously the news this weekend was that Bristol GP are dropping out of the paddock, which came as a bit of a surprise to me. I'm not sure about you, but sounds like CF Moto sponsorship has pulled the plug and disappeared. So it'd be a bit of a shame to see that team go, because over the years they've been a plucky little team, and obviously Bezecchi probably is their most sort of famous rider, fight flat championship with Martin back in 2018. But it's never nice to see a team drop out of the paddock in that fashion. But since we're talking about Artigas, thought we'd just give it a little mention. But yeah, we had that crash at the start of the race. But after that, like you say, basically until Onshu and Alonso started going at it, it was pretty clean. But even after that, still pretty clean. And I think it kind of shows that there was no overtakes, particularly that Sasaki sort of led on to the last lap and was able to win his first race of the season, which is a surprise to me, actually. I hadn't even realised he hadn't won one until, I think, like the last round. I think like you might have mentioned it, and I didn't even realise that he hadn't won one. I just assumed he had. But he's been mugged so many times in the last laps, I think. Would you say that obviously he rode a very good last lap, but would you say definitely the fact that it's hard to pass here played into that? Because other tracks we've seen him be mugged where it's been easier to make the positions.
75% track, 25% Sasaki is what I would kind of go with. He does cover the line a bit into the final corner. And he's very good at corner speed, so he doesn't like very, very, very much like Fanati, where he doesn't ridiculously brake late and square everything off, and he runs the bike into the corner probably fast and carries the speed through. So for the most part, usually he's easier to overtake. But at a track where, like, if you look at the midfield or the in section of Valencia, it's constantly turning back, so you're kind of always running the bike in, trying to keep the corner speed and keep turning. You're never really making V's out, especially in these Moto 3 bikes, which wouldn't be the most kind of stop and go bikes in the paddock. So it probably was, in a way, like all his stars aligned for him, because it was one of those tracks where if you can get to the front, it's not going to be easy to re-overtake. It does probably, like Lorenzo was always very good around here. It is a bit of a stop-go track, but it still has a lot of slow flowing corners, so it did suit him a bit better. And again, he did do exactly what he needed to do. He just covered enough into the last corner, and Alonso in second didn't really have anything he could do to get them to the line. But it was more than deserved, because he should have done it a long time ago. But it was one of those things. His first win it was going to come. It was just a matter of when. And to be honest, we'll probably come to here in a second about Messia, but imagine the championship didn't end last week. It would have been a big kind of part of the championship that he came here, and like we expect him every week to be quick, whereas Messia has the odd weekend where maybe it's equipment, maybe it's him, it just struggles to work. It was the same when Foggia was on the Honda, where the odd weekend he'd be 12th, and that would be the limit. He couldn't get any higher, and I think Messia overall has been just slightly better than that in terms of his bad weekends as a P6, P7, where years gone by, the Leopard team, when they've had a bad weekend, they can be on fringe points for the week. So it was just good to see Sasaki go out on a flourish with a nice result, go up to Moto 2 and maybe internally cure some demons getting that win, because it was a tough week, I'd imagine, coming from here after Qatar.
Yeah, it was nice to see him get his last win. Obviously, he goes up to Moto 2 next year, so one final win in the Moto 3 class. Actually got to win this season, which is nice. Obviously sealed that runners-up spot, because he actually could technically have still lost it if he crashed and David Alonso would finish first or second. I think it was possible for David to actually overthrow him. But you make some mention of Messia. I was going to just come on to that point now, that obviously the championship last time, bit of a cloud over it with the way it was won, basically with the tactics for Leopard. We obviously were pretty, upset about it, saying we didn't think it was very fair. We're pretty disgusted with some of the antics. Seems like that's a general opinion. Social media, pundits, everybody kind of seems to think the same thing. And a lot of people now saying that it looks even more different now, because the gap was 6 points. The gap was now 6 points after this race between the two riders, which is such a small margin. Obviously, Messia, I think, finished P13, had a pretty poor race, to be honest. He was sort of just off the back of the lead group initially, but just went backwards throughout the pack. Top Honda was 11th in this race, so I think that kind of shows you that it clearly was not a Honda circuit, but he wasn't even top Honda. It was actually for Sato that finished in 11th. But if we still had the championship alive, Sasaki picks up 6 more points in Qatar. He wins the championship today. Well, he probably doesn't. He needs 7 probably. If he picks up 7 more points in Qatar, he wins the championship, because obviously he only had the one win that he's just picked up here. So people are now saying it does change the complexion of those moves, because we were sort of saying last week that Messier was probably going to win it anyway, so it just seemed a bit needless. But if Messier was 13th and Sasaki wins today, and last week Sasaki was like P3, Sasaki is the world champion. So I think probably worth mentioning there that, I don't know what you think, but it does seem like those tactics now have had a bigger impact than we first thought.
I still don't think it's okay what he did, and there's been lots of interviews. TNT Sports interviewed him. I'd imagine that probably Marca or Dazan probably have interviewed him in Spanish. He basically came out defending him, saying like that. The issue is for me, right, is he's clearly me against the world mentality has kind of come back to bite him in a way, because what he said this week gone by there about the Qatar weekend was that it was me versus all the KTMs all year. Sasaki had help. Up until Qatar, there was 3 KTM manufacturer bikes. There was the Husqvarna of Sasaki, there was the KTM of Dennis Onshu, still technically in it, and Holgado was it Alonso? Was Onshu already out?
I think Onshu may have already been out. I think Alonso.
It was
3 different KTM manufactured bikes, basically.
Exactly. So to say he's had help all year from the other KTMs up until the round that you see in the championship, there's been other bikes in it that have been trying to win the championship still. So that's just him thinking that like everyone's out to get him. That's kind of a bit of shows a bit of his mentality, I suppose. Maybe still maybe not as bulletproof as we probably have thought this year. If he's thinking that like, oh, they're all out to get me, even though they're still battling amongst each other trying to win this championship. So you could kind of see his mentality of why it ended up doing what he did. But again, still don't by any means sympathize with his moves and stuff like that. He said he was basically targeting Sasaki, that he wanted to take points off him in a way and bring him further back down the grid, and in a way hopefully he could make a bigger gap and go to Valencia not needing as many points. But the fact he scored only a handful of points today, Sasaki gets to win. Now, would it be a different story if we went and the championship was still on with Sasaki of 1? Would Messier finish so low? Maybe. It's hard to, it's 2020 vision for hindsight, like, so it's never going to be perfect, but it just always puts the question in your back of mind, thinking, well, like, if Adrian Fernandez, Leopard and Messier weren't up to their dirty games, which pretty much everyone has come out in favour of Sasaki, and no one has come out, in a way, it's kind of, a lot of people on social media have done the right thing. Instead of coming out slating Messier, there's been the odd one, McDoon being one, most people are coming out commending and congratulating Sasaki and saying how brilliant his year has been. They hold your head up, you're the real champion, blah blah. There's been plenty of that, so I think a lot of people are praising Sasaki for his, I suppose, again, he didn't act rash. He could have done a lot of things in Qatar. He could have easily punted off Adrian Fernandez when he was up to his games. Also, there's another thing for Adrian Fernandez. We didn't see this on TV, but he did roll the throttle on straight and make Sasaki brake. Basically brake checked him, which is like, in my eyes, that's not a million miles off of what what Finati did in Misano in 2018.
Yeah, that's terrible. I didn't know. I hadn't heard that.
I heard this from Sylvan that he was talking to Sasaki in an airport, I think, before we went here, that Adrian Fernandez basically just brake checked him on a straight. So that's a race ban for me. Like, if we go back to what Onshu got a penalty for in Texas for the kind of moving when he had the big collision with Pedro Acosta, and I don't remember who else was there. I think I'm not sure who else was involved in that incident, but that was a race ban for Onshu, and I think we all felt that he got scapegoated that day, whereas by no means
that was still a mistake. Ultimately, he was just trying to get the situation with another rider and accidentally caused an accident.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're literally chopping the throttle on straight, that's not a race ban. That's out. Like that's gone.
Yeah,
like, you're banned. You're banned for at least a season. Like,
yeah, but I think because maybe I'm again, I heard nothing other than Sasaki saying it, so I'm not really sure what will ever come of it. Would probably, I think the Finati thing was so bad because we caught clear on day on camera. We saw it live as it happened, and we knew straight away there was going to be a massive inquest into it. Whereas because it came out after the race that Adrian Fernandez did such a thing, and Another bit of backstory that I didn't really think of for the last podcast is the whole reason why Adrian Fernandez was so anti KTM group is because of his treatment of his brother. His brother Raul Fernandez was forced to go up into the class when he wanted to leave KTM group and go to Yamaha. And then throughout the year had many fallings out with the team, was forced to ride with concussion apparently. Neither of the Fernandez brothers would I kind of take anything without a grain of salt really. So it's just a messy situation, and I feel like that Sasaki was the unlucky party in this one, that Adrian Fernandez was trying to get a personal family vendetta out on the KTMs and the Husqvarnas and that sort of group. So it's
He also has an issue with that team specifically, if you remember that he rode for that team previously when it was Max Racing.
that too, yeah. So
yeah,
it's
there's
just
potentially a personal thing in there for him.
It's just messy, and it's very, very sad that it's been Sasaki who's paid for it in a way, because he's had a brilliant season. Last season in the championship, he won to kind of go with a bang, and he definitely had a chance of winning the title. And this has just proved today in this race, that he was so quick, and on his day, he was, I'd say, probably outright fastest man in the category because of the way he rode on the bike. So, just kind of finish up. It will again even put more of a kind of shine off the Messiah title because of the fact that he had to do that to still win it, whereas a lot of people felt after Qatar, I was like, you didn't need to do it, but now it looks like he did have to do it to win it. So again, that doesn't really justify doing it, but you don't win a title like that. Like, so it's again just the mess from last week has carried on, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's one of those things as well. In like years' time, people won't remember that happened at the penultimate round of the season, and that it technically like made it say he just won the championship early. People will probably remember that's how he won it. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not gonna go away anytime soon. This, I don't think. It is a shame, because I think if Messiah had won this last race, actually, it kind of regards what happened in this one, right? If Messiah had won this last race, whatever, you'd be like, okay, well, I still don't really understand why he did that then, because it was pointless. But now it's kind of like, well, did he know he's just going to be really weak at this circuit or something? Or, was it just because the championship's over, he just switched off and wasn't bothered? There could be that element to it as well. But yeah, it's a shame that we're still having to talk about this as well. The fact that, like, because it happened, it's such a big talking point with this Moto3 season, because it's been a good season, and to be honest, I really want to commend how well of a job Messiah has done this season, because let's face it, he's not on the best equipment. The Leopard bikes, it's not a bad marketing, don't get me wrong, but you can see a weekend like this, for example, the bike wasn't any better than, it wasn't a top 10 bike today. None of the Hondas were a top 10 bike, so yeah, it kind of shows that over the course of the season he's done a fantastic job. He's capitalised on the Honda circuits and the new circuits, and perhaps in some weird conditions, but then he kind of spoilt it by behaving the way he did, although I suppose he wasn't the worst of the two, and also him doing it makes more sense than his teammate doing it. But yeah, it's just a shame, and I think probably something that we hopefully can forget. But yeah, it's just kind of tarnished the championship a little bit. But a championship that was won in a decent fashion and not tarnished was the Moto2 championship, obviously won quite a while ago. So we'll move on to that race now. So the race didn't start in the best way. Obviously, we had a little crash in Moto3 on the opening lap. We had two pretty horrible crashes in Moto2 on the opening lap. Turn 4, we had Garcia going down and getting collected by Guevara hitting Garcia's body. At the last corner, we didn't quite really see the crash at the last corner because it's sort of in the top of the shot. Nazani went down and got hit by Alex Escreech, I believe, if not mistaken. I think those are the two. Yeah, were involved in that one. Two pretty horrible accidents, but fortunately, we were able to get away with them because everyone seems to be relatively okay. But I don't know about you, Dill, but my first thoughts were pretty bad. It looked like a pretty horrible accident the first time.
Yeah, the Sergio Garcia one was horrific. To be fair, the first time you see both of them, you kind of wince and think, "Oh, geez, what have I just seen?" You kind of tense up. It's one of those ones where a rider falling in a pack and getting hit at all, whether it be head on or glanced or whatever, it's never going to be nice. So, seeing Garcia I've watched it back a few times. It doesn't look as bad the more I watch it, because he slides and kind of gets a glancing blow, where the first time it looks like he just gets completely run straight over. So it makes more sense than when you see him kind of sitting up. Now, he did go to the medical centre, and I have yet to see anything on his condition, but I did see him get up and walk away in the gravel. At the time, we all thought it was going to be a red flag, just because we thought that it would be that he'd need a stretcher, serious medical attention at the side of the track. So we all thought straight away it was going to be a red flag. But obviously, through the marshals and the signalling and stuff like that, they figured out pretty quickly that he was okay to be moved under his own steam, and went straight to the medical centre. And again, we kind of wish him well, but at the moment, there's no news at the time of recording on his condition. But the fact he was up and about kind of shows that at worst maybe there's a bone broken, which is not nice, and obviously it's terrible with injury season. But the fact he was conscious and moving under his own steam, like I said, was good. But the second crash, we kind of get in a weird long lens from turn one, start of the grid, back to the last corner. Looks like Nozane's already crashed, and Alex Scrigg comes through, and he kind of just glances off him. Again, this could have been a lot worse, because it looks like whatever way Nozane is after crashing, the way he's rolling, he kind of rolls and kind of glances off the side of the Moto 2 bike. So again, that one at first glance looks like he gets a lot harder of a hit, but again, he kind of just glances. No, again, I say it as if he gets a glance off a door. He still gets a nice whack, like, but that could have been extremely bad, that crash, because he's already crashed in front of him, and coming out of Adrian Campbell's corner in Valencia would be fourth gear, 110 miles an hour. You're getting clipped with there, like, so it's not going to be a nice feeling. But he also was up a bit of a limp, but that might have been from, I'd imagine, judging where he ended up, he probably high-sided, so I'd imagine it could have been from that. And I'm kind of hoping that maybe a bit like Pecco, his injury is more from his own crash rather than the contact. But yeah, it was just a messy opening lap. Thankfully, it calmed down after that. But yeah, just a real show of what can happen, how bad it can go, how quickly it can go bad in our sport. But thankfully, it does look like that both men are okay, and we got away lucky, definitely.
Yeah, they both jumped to their feet pretty quickly, so that's always a good sign. And I haven't heard anything else, just like you, but generally that's if they're up on their feet and you don't really hear anything, it's probably because there's not really much to hear. So it's good. Hopefully they should be all okay, because of course Moto 3 and Moto 2 guys have got their tests for tomorrow, although I suppose for Nozane that won't make a difference because he's not going to be on the grid. But of course, Garcia is going to be there, so he'll be hoping that he can be okay to test tomorrow. Now, something we did mention in the Moto 3 race was just how difficult it was to pass. That was amplified once again in Moto 2, with dive bombing to be the only way you can actually make a pass. Alonso Lopez was a good example of that. In turn 4, he pulled off some pretty aggressive passes, really sort of pushing people out of the way in something that he's become quite well known for. He wasn't the only one, but his seemed to be the harshest passes, and just highlights again, Valencia, not the best track for racing, is it? Just because there were kind of trains of riders for a little while, broken up by the odd dive bomb, but there wasn't really. It was pretty much turn 4 where all the passes were coming. It was the only place you could really pull a pass, and you were sitting the other rider up regardless every single lap. And if you were Lopez, you were really sitting up the other rider.
It shows in all three classes how the technical rules have done a good job of bringing pretty much everyone really close together, because years gone by there has been races that there's been more overtakes for the lead and stuff like that. But Moto 2 being, as I call it most weeks, a spec class in a way, it's very hard to make the difference without, like, you can do what a lot what the odd rider was doing, which was kind of leaving the brake off, but unless you're making contact, you're more than likely going to go right, and you'd lose the move you made from 4 to 5 in that little short kind of squirt there. You'd lose your overtake, so that would kind of negate the overtake. What some of them were doing was kind of block passing, kind of sitting riders up and running them wide. It's just a messy corner. It's a messy track. It's not an amazing track. There's very few riders who like it. It's a horrible place to go when you need to win a championship. You would much rather a racetrack that is, you'd rather a Silverstone kind of racetrack where it's wide open. There's a lot of places where you can do things. It's more of a good racetrack, whereas Valencia's tight, twisty. It all folds in on itself. Now, from a spectator, it's more like a stadium, because apparently it has the world's longest grandstand, which can hold up to like 100,000 people. I think it goes around the whole, like, one side of the track. So that's a pretty cool feature to it. And because it's in a bit of a dome, if you sit pretty much anywhere, you can kind of see the whole track, which in a way, I suppose, as a viewer, would probably be brilliant. But in terms of viewing in the TV aspect of it. It's not a great racetrack. It's they struggle to make overtakes. We go there at a really bad time of year for temperatures because GP bikes have the asymmetric tires. Moto 2 and Moto 3 don't, so it makes it very risky into like the turn 4, turn 8, as well as another big crash zone, and I suppose you could say turn 11 as well, was you kind of trail brake around, it goes on the change of direction there. So it's just one of those tracks where it kind of makes you wince. Like I was watching the GP race, a perfect example. We'll get to that later, but it was just it's just not a great track, and I think for a while I've defended it because it was kind of like kind of nostalgic way of we've been here for so many years, we finished so many championships here. It's the night the day after we get to test, you see Valentino on the Ducati, you saw Lorenzo going on the Honda and the Ducati, you saw Maverick on the Yamaha. All these years of seeing these new kind of combinations at that track, and it felt like a nice thing. But I think that's probably going to be taken off the edge of it now, because I think we really need to probably look at going somewhere else. It's definitely the weakest track in Spain. I'd much rather an Aragon being thrown back on, or something else. But if we're
got one of them next year.
Oh jeez. Well, I just think Valencia is it's outstayed.
Aragon and Valencia. So
yeah. I just think it's outlast. It's gotten to the point where even Moto 2 bikes look a bit wonky around and like the GB bikes just don't work there. They're just too much on the limit, and they're just too big for the class. So it's a bit of a shame really. The track has kind of been dwarfed now. Of course, GP bikes are kind of doing that a lot of tracks. Like there's talks of Haret being maybe unsafe. We saw when Marquez came back last year after his injury, maybe the year before, crashing and reaching a wall into corner after Pedrosa. So it's a lot of tracks with the aero and stuff like that, and as well with the Moto 2 class gone to the 765, they are reaching higher speeds and they're getting probably more out of the bikes than they ever have. So every track is kind of getting a bit more tight, and I think Valencia's days are numbered in my opinion. I'd be very quick to get rid of it, and I've been someone who's tried to defend it for a long period of time, saying that it's a kind of a classic end to a season. But after today, and to add to the question you threw to me a while at the start of the podcast, we're going to Valencia from the 15th to the 17th of November next year, so we'll be a week later then. We usually go there, and we're about 10 days earlier than we are this year, so there'll be slightly later than normal, but still not as late as now. But it'll be just as cold, I'd imagine. So it's going to be probably more this next year. So probably going to be having the same podcast in a year's time.
Yeah, we could upload the same episode. We saw it. Don't bother recording a new one, but yeah, it is Mickey Mouse, isn't it? As we like to say sometimes, the track it's very much like a go-karty track. Is what they kind of say. It's very tight, difficult to pass, and if you look at it from a heli shot, it does look like a bit of a go-kart track. I mean, the start for this straight is deceivingly long, actually. Like you think it looks quite short, but it's actually quite long. But it's pretty much the only massive straight. There's kind of the curved straight in the middle of the lap, but yeah, it's about it. The rest of it's quite a tight, twisty track, which I think is what makes it so difficult to actually overtake. But someone who didn't have to do much overtaking because of his good qualifying was Marcos Ramirez. Another good result for the Spaniard. Obviously, he's been in Moto2 for a decent while now. I think, was it 2019 was his first season, or 2020, something like that. But he's been in the class for a few years now. Was at American Racing for a couple of seasons. Got dropped. Was on the forward bike at the start of the season. Miserable time for him because the forward bike is not competitive. SDK gets dropped in the middle of the season. Ramirez has been really pretty good at these last few rounds, and another really good result for Ramirez. I think is that 2 podiums he's had now, so that's really showing. And he's secured himself a ride for next season. Unfortunately, at the expense of Roy Skinner, who as a rookie, hasn't really been given much of a chance. I suppose next year you think he would make a step, but Ramirez, you can't really fault him. I mean, he was really battling it. He actually didn't quite get the podium, did he? He was battling Lopez for it, and he just lost out. But another great ride from him, and so 21 1,000ths away from the podium. Just considering where the other people have been on that bike, even Bobier the season before, where people have been on that bike, he's doing a very good job.
Yeah, in fairness, it's a shock, really, to be brutally honest. The fact he's been there, it's such a turnaround. He's gone from being nowhere to being right up there, and It's not like he's holding his breath for a qualifying lap and qualifying fourth and finishing 13th. He's kind of showing that the whole package seems to be there for him. And the last couple of weeks, getting a set of podiums really ends off his season and kind of confirms why Royce kind of has been dropped from, because the results clearly are more further up the grid, with like someone who's a lot more experienced in the class as well. So it's kind of what to be expected. I've always thought Ramirez was a mid-table rider. I'd never expected him to do much, but now the fact he's up the sharp end, it's actually quite strange seeing him up there, because I just never thought he had it in him. But you kind of have to just tip your hat to him. He's been very, very solid since he's jumped ship from the forward bike and got into the American racing team. So I kind of hope that he can carry this momentum into the winter and build upon it and come back next year, and maybe can he have a season similar to Gonzalez, where he's kind of been roughly top 5 and just good points and solid through the season. To be honest, probably at the start of the year he probably will fade a bit again. I don't think he's going to take this into a championship challenge, for example. I think that it still shows that even though he's getting good results, he's still a good bit off the top, but he made such a step as well from where he was towards the start of the season. So I must admit, he's actually really kind of overdone what I thought he ever could have done. So again, just kind of fair play to him, and a big best of luck to him next year, because it's going to be tight class next year. But you never know. Then with the Pirellis, might be something. He might be. We've seen riders go forward when tyre changes. Remember Thomas Luthi, when they brought in the different front Dunlop, it was basically the end of his career. He just couldn't get on when it went backwards. Similar to Davi in GP, when they brought in the different Michelin, just didn't work for him. Couldn't get his head around it, and that was kind of the end of his career in a way. And you might see something in terms of the whole class, and same in Moto 3 next year with the Pirellis. You might see some surprise riders. So maybe he's found form at the perfect time, jumps on a Calyx with Pirellis in the coming days, and probably maybe could be even closer to the front. So you never know what the future's going to hold with the tyre change. It could throw anything into the wind. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do next year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he can actually carry that momentum forward into the next season. I kind of agree with you that I didn't think he had it in him. I mean, he was with American Racing for a couple of seasons before, and I think maybe he had like one or two sort of like maybe decent finishes, maybe got like a top 5 once or twice, but like didn't really see him sort of week in, week out being up there. But the last couple of weekends he has been really competitive, so it has been a bit of a surprise that you see him. And maybe the Pirellis will work for him, maybe they won't. I guess we don't really know what's going to happen until we get into the racing next season, of course. And even throughout the season, I think it could be one of those really weird ones where it changes so much because everyone's learning so much. A bit like the first year of the Triumphs, really. It was kind of a bit of a topsy-turvy season, lots of different people fighting for the championship at different points. And obviously, like you say, Tom Luthi, for example, his career was basically ended by a tyre change, and it could happen, especially some more of the veteran riders in the class, although not really many of those left now, with obviously Sam Lowe's leaving. This is obviously his last race. I'm trying to think of probably who's the next most experienced rider in the class. There's not really that many around anymore. Yeah, probably is Joe Roberts, because Schrotter's been gone now for this season, obviously, hasn't he? And yeah, a lot of those sort of riders that were in Moto 2 for a long time have sort of faded away now. So I think, yeah, probably Joe Roberts is one of the most experienced riders, which is a surprise to actually think about, because I still think of him as a fairly young guy, but I think he's been in the class since like 2018. So yeah, a decent while for Joe Roberts. Also going to the American Racing team, so I guess we'll see what's going to go on with that team. But someone who has been fantastic, and we'll be hoping that the tyres make no difference to him, is Firmin Aldeguer. Another win once again, another dominant performance. You just can't believe how good he's been these last few rounds, because at the start of last season, looked like he was the next big thing. It looked like he was going to be absolutely amazing. And then he just dropped off. He basically, after that collision with Vietti, he just disappeared. Like he was on the shopping list of MotoGP teams, all of a sudden, sort of nowhere. Lopez ends up getting Fenati's ride a few rounds later, starts performing, winning races. Aldeguer still struggling to get points and top 10s and stuff. And it kind of almost continued like that a little bit this year. Start of this year, he made a bit more of a step. I think he was a regular top 10 rider, but Lopez was still fighting for victories and stuff. But then sort of half of the season's almost swapped, and Aldeguer's been pretty much there week in, week out. So he won at Silverstone, then sort of did go missing a little bit for a few rounds, but ever since sort of Mandalika, he's been fighting for the win every weekend, right at the front in qualifying, and his teammates were the ones struggling, and it just looks like he's unstoppable now because they've been to so many different tracks. We were saying that maybe it was the flyaways, working the tyres. We've gone to a freezing Valencia today, and he's still won there. So is Aldeguer looking like the favourite, odds-on favourite for next year now? Because I certainly think so. It looks like people are going to struggle to stop him. Even Acosta can't go anywhere near him.
No, he's not, because look what his teammate did last year and look what his teammate this year.
That's true.
I can't see a non-Calix winning a championship, and I'm probably one of the biggers up of Aldeguer. I'm a massive fan of him ever since he came into the class. All the hype about him when he was in Junior Moto 2 or whatever the class was called when he was in it. I've been banging the drum about him for a while, and because the fact he's on the speed up or Bosco Scuro chassis, he goes missing because of that, because there's only 2 on the grid for next year as the empty helmets take 2 of them onto the grid for 24. So I just don't see it over a 22 round season how that bike beats the Calix with all, like, an M1 isn't going to beat a Ducati when there's 8 Ducatis to 2 M1. So for me, that's the issue, because we all expected Alonso Lopez to come into this year swinging. Now maybe he's slightly underperformed, had an okay season. He's like P8 in the championship, but I think the level of Aldeguer has gotten him to turn this championship. But the fact is, like, over the last 4 rounds, he's taken 100 points. His total for the year is like 280. That's just like, put that into context of how many points he's gained to make his championship look so much better. So he's just had such a sweet spot, as well as when it's a bit colder and there's a bit of a weird weekend where that chassis seems to come to the front. But maybe it's just a cynic in me, but I just don't see how the bike, not him, can be fast enough to beat the Calix. Now again, it's hard to say when we're going to Pirellis next year, but naturally Pirellis are soft and they move and they're a bit squishy, and the speed up, as it was formerly known, is a very rigid chassis, more rigid than the Calix. Hence why the Calix kind of moves around a bit more on corner and tree, if you watch Gore, for example, whereas you look at the years gone by with Sam, with now all the way up to as far as Fermin Aldeguer, it's a very wheels and line bike. It doesn't drift that much. Sam was one of those ones where he made it drift, but probably wasn't right with the ride up bike, because it seems very. It seems it makes grip when there's no grip, but if there's grip, it's kind of like a Yamaha in a way, where there's finds grip when there's nothing there, but if it's an equal playing field, it doesn't have anything to kind of fight with. So, unless the chassis makes a step with the tires, but just judging off of what we kind of know from kind of historically what a Pirelli tire will be like, and historically what the chassis is like, they probably will not be amazing together. I'd probably think it would be a bit heavy on tires, because it'd probably be a bit too stiff for the bike. But again, maybe I'm wrong. But I hope in a way I'm wrong, because I really want him to fight for the title and be up there. But I just think being on it's kind of like the age old adage of you're never going to win as a GP title in a satellite team. You're never going to win on a bike that's kind of outclassed in terms of numbers and data, especially in the modern day, even in Moto 2. So it's going to be very tough for him. But in terms of this year, the end of the season, Silverstone, amazing. He's showing off his talent that we all knew he had. Massively taking the shine off of Pedro Acosta's end of the season and his title, because I've kind of already forgotten Pedro's in the class, to be honest, because he's kind of been nowhere. Fermin has been absolutely on fire. He's been winning, and he made the mistake in Qatar, came back and won, looked brilliant there. Looked brilliant here as well today, because he got to the front. Can it, in fairness to him, you have to tip your hat to him. He tried to go with him and did for a while and closed the gap down, a couple of fast laps, but in the end, that combination of Bosco Sciorra and Fermin Aldeguer was just too strong, and it's a shame he's on that bike, because I think he's probably odds-on favourite, like Acosta was this year, to win the title if he's on a Calix next year. But maybe he's that good that he can win it on that bike, and that would be an amazing feat to win it on a inferior chassis in a class that's so tight.
Yeah, it would be really, really amazing if he could do it. I mean, I can see what you mean about Alonso Lopez. Obviously, last year had a very good sort of end to the season, but potentially it's one of those things where I think he's a bit better than Lopez. So
100% by a mile.
Like And obviously, as we saw in the Junior GP, that's how it ended up as well. So, yeah, Lopez didn't quite live up to the hype, but I think Aldeguer is probably quicker and makes less rash mistakes and things like that. And I think that's what's cost Lopez a lot this year as well. So some dodgy passes and like he's not like been nowhere either. I think you're right about the Bosco being a little bit hit and miss, but they're going to have double the data next year with the MT Helmets team. Obviously, Agora, another top rider on that bike as well. So, potentially they could. This is their chance to make up ground because a lot of the data is going to be gone. So, they're going to be gaining a little bit more. So hopefully, it should help them out. But yeah, you're probably right that it's unlikely that he'll win on Bosco Scuro. But I'm going to hope. I'm going to say that he's going to be the favourite. That's my bold prediction. Although you did mention Pedro Acosta, of course, as well, has just kind of been nowhere ever since Aldeguer turned up, really. I mean, he finished second to him a couple of times, if I'm not mistaken, but the last 2 rounds, he's just been nowhere. Like, he's just been really struggling. I mean, Qatar, not a massive surprise to see him struggling. It is a flowing circuit. He said he doesn't really like the flowing circuits, but I'm surprised to see how bad he was here. I mean, he was much worse here than he was at Qatar, even. I mean, he's going to have to go buy a Renas. I mean, he's been miles clear of a Renas all season. He's battling with a Renas, and it's weird actually. He was battling with a Renas, Agora, and Gonzalez, sort of, but really far down the order. It was a bit strange that a couple of good riders were down there with him, but I don't know what's happened to Acosta. I mean, maybe he's just like already checked out. He's not bothered about winning a couple more Moto2 races. He's just focusing on GP. Maybe that's what he's doing, but I just seems strange because he was so dominant for so much of the season, and then even finishing second to Aldeguer, you could say, okay, the Bosco Scuro was working so good he couldn't keep up with him, but the last couple of rounds, he's not even been second to him. He's been miles behind, like really far back.
It's unfortunate, really, because everyone's kind of thinking, "Ooh, are we a little bit over exaggerating how good he is?" And to be fair, there's no question how good he is. He won the title so early because of how amazing he was throughout the year, and throughout the year we tried to build this narrative of Acosta and Arbolino, but it really wasn't ever going to be anything because the fact was Arbolino got a bit of a lead, and that was enough to make a championship go on as far as probably like the summer break roughly, and after that he's kind of been steamrolled. And even today Arbolino's had a tough weekend and he was still beaten by Acosta, who's already, in my opinion, riding the R16 in his head. So it's a bit of maybe he's thinking ahead at trying to keep himself fit. He doesn't want to have a mistake, and he doesn't want to make a silly mistake battling for a win that he doesn't need to do. He just wants to go out and finish off a tidy season with some decent results and not kind of override and stuff. And we always know Moto 2, if you're missing 0.5%, that's the difference between first and like ninth. So you don't need to be missing much to go quite far back. But it's just a bit strange, right, that he's had such a off-colour end to the season, because since when he won the title, he was all about kind of going, well, I'm going to go out and finish the season off and show why I'm champion. But he's kind of done the opposite, really, and kind of just like drifted off into a mediocre end to the season, and was kind of like happy enough just to win his title. And again, I think in a way he's already probably turned his head with the GP ride, and I think that's all he can focus on now. And I think he's had an amazing season, and we can probably give him a bit of slack that he's kind of right tail off towards the end. He's probably not really been under much pressure for a while. I think as well, we've seen in a couple of years where Marcus, where as soon as the title's done, that kind of release of that stress is gone. It's actually quite hard to get back to that level of where you were. So it's probably a lot of reasons. I'd mainly put it down to the fact that he's probably thinking already of Tuesday riding the KTM.
I'm going to throw this to you here, a question about Acosta, right? Obviously, in Moto3, no doubt he came in straight away as a rookie, obviously dominated it. But in this Moto2 season that he's had this season, of course, would you say that the field is overall quite weak compared to what we've had in the past in terms of the Moto2 grid? And could that have played into his domination? Because, of course, we had some of the previous riders that were fighting for the championship, like obviously Augusto Fernandez was gone, Agora was injured, and overall, like obviously Arbolino was like his top competitor, whereas Arbolino was, not. He had some good races at the season before, but wasn't sort of a championship threat at all. Would it be? Could that potentially be why he's dominated so much? Just because the field is not so strong? Because of course we've had Aldeguer's not come good till late. Vietti's kind of been in a rough patch. we've had. Obviously, Lopez hasn't had the best season he could have had.
Yeah, I can kind of see it. The thing for me is, right, I just think that if he does have a slightly higher competition, he has another level. I think you don't need to go 100% a million miles an hour every lap, every session when you have maybe 5% over your opposition. And I think for the whole season, he knew Arbolino he had beat. Arbolino, as soon as was getting mentioned for the GP contract, that was the end of his season because his head was turned. He started misfiring. His season went downhill a bit. And as well, the fact that Arbolino's not 6-7 years in that class, he's still relatively inexperienced. We saw it with Vietti last year and a bit this year that as a newer rider to the class, it's not as easy as going and being consistent. It's probably even more of a compliment to Acosta being in his second year, being as consistent as he was. Only had a couple of blips throughout the year with maybe a small bit of weather and a crash or two, but for the most part, he's been really strong. And I think, to be honest, right, if he's put under more stress, he comes out even stronger. I think he has an extra level, but I do understand that the level of Moto 2 is probably in a bit of like the fact that Joe Roberts now is the most experienced rider. Joe Roberts is not what I would class as, like, if you go back to when Tom Luthi was the most experienced, that was a multiple race winner, could have been championship champion on a multiple occasions, was a 125 champion back in 2004. 2004.
So I can't correct you.
I'm going to go and stick with 2004. I think it was him, Pedrosa Rossi that year. Yeah, I think that was the champions that year. That's a stretch.
I thought you were saying it was Bali Rossi. I was about to say.
No, they were the two champions for the year. I was digging deep into the archive for that one, if it's correct.
You're trying to think of the photos, the Valencia.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it was either Rossi in 03 and whoever won the 250 in 03 would have been with him. But essentially, back to the point of that, the most experienced rider there would have been someone who was a world champion, multiple racer in the class, had a good go at multiple championships. Whereas, like, if we're now talking about the most experienced guy in the class being a guy who's won a Mario Kart race at Portimao, is kind of an odd way to say it, but he's by no means is he of that level. Like, Roberts on his day is quick, but his day is like 3 weekends a season, and that's probably why he's moved from team to team and only won one race, and I think there's issues there and stuff like that with him and his own performance. But just the overall field, there's just too much of a turnover in the class. Like, again, I mentioned a while ago on Rory Skinner, the fact he's lost his ride. There's so many new riders every year because they're like, oh, well, it's just like, oh, he didn't win, get rid of him, we'll get in the next fella. Oh, he didn't win, get rid of him, we'll get the next fella. It's like, well, no, you need to give him at least 2 years. Look at Fabio Di Gianantonio, for example, and Iker Lecuona. I'm a big fan of him. He had a decent career in Moto 2, got up to GP a bit earlier, and is outriding his teammate in World Superbike, in my opinion, at Honda, doing the best job he can on very limited equipment with that Honda. So he got shot out and spat out of the GP kind of career straight away for having 1 year where he wasn't that bad. He had some decent results on the KT and wasn't a million miles off what you could say Augusto Fernandez has done this year. So he's not been terrible by any means when he was there, and he's just been spat up and threw away, and he's no good. And unless he ends up on a Honda this year, which realistically he's not going to know at this point, it's another one that won't really make it back to the class. So I think, to kind of get back to answer the question, I think a lot of the more senior riders moved on to different things. A lot of the old timers, your Corsies, all them have gone, and just the older riders have gone. So now it's probably a bit more of an inexperienced field, and a lot of young riders coming through, your Firmino Aldier, like that's sort of level. I think they're all at a high level, but a lot of them are inexperienced, and that's probably the reason why Costa's won it so early, is because we didn't have anyone week in, week out, because we had maybe the first 5 rounds where Arbolino looked to be relatively in his kind of league, but then from there on it was one of those seasons where the consistency of the guy in second was never the same as Acosta, and that was the issue for the season.
Yeah, I'm trying to rack my brain now thinking of anyone that probably has done more races than Roberts. Maybe Chantra. I don't know when he actually joined the class, but he's been around for a good while. But yeah, you jump through most of the teams. You especially if you jump a bit further back. Obviously, you've got like RW Race has got really inexperienced lineup. Same with like Bosco Scuro Speed Up. Arenas hasn't been in Moto.
No,
Who's that? Oh, Jake
2019.
Dixon, I guess, is probably one of the more experienced riders.
He's definitely
2018.
up there, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it is one of those things where it is these riders that we still don't think have been in their class for that long. It's not like, like you say, Tom Luthi had been in the class since it started. Like aside from like one season that was terrible in like MotoGP. So yeah, it probably is a bit more of an inexperienced field. I kind of agree with you that I think that if he had a better field, he could sort of step his game up. But I just thought I'd throw the question, see what you thought, about it being a bit of a weaker field. I mean, even last year, I think it was a slightly weak field, maybe. I think it kind of has been, just the way it plays out. I think next year it could be quite good if you have some of those Moto3 rookies for this year stepping up a bit, like Foggia and Guevara and Garcia, although Garcia's not been too bad. But if those guys make another step next year, it probably will make the class a bit more competitive again. And obviously you've got Aldeguer and obviously Lopez and a few of the riders of Salach on a better bike. So it'll be interesting to see how it does play out next season. I think it probably could be a bit of a stronger, closer championship, but I guess we'll find. Well, I said that Aldeguer's favourites. Actually, I'm assuming that it's going to be a domination on the Bosco Scuro, but maybe the battle for second could be a bit closer. Well, obviously, it wasn't that close. Battle for third, though, obviously that got won this weekend. Aldeguer coming out on top ahead of Jake Dixon, but somewhere where there was, of course, a championship up for grabs was MotoGP. Obviously, it was a pretty slim chance of there being a change, but still a mathematical change, and more of a chance than there was last year. I think that's safe to say. Nobody thought Fabio Quartararo was going to be able to beat Bagnaia, because Bagnaia could have crashed, and Quartararo was not going to win the race. So it was never going to be won back. Whereas this season, if Bagnaia did make a mistake, Martin is in a good position to win, and also with there being the sprint, it means that he didn't need to finish so low down in the order. So it was more possible than last year, but I think we can agree not the most likely thing. But the sprint race did tee up the main race pretty well. Martin obviously didn't qualify the best, qualified 6th after another weird tyre decision during the qualifying session, but even still didn't let it bother him, took the lead pretty early on in the sprint, and did manage to hold it till the end, fighting off Brad Binder. So winning that sprint and bringing down the championship lead. So what did you make of that sprint race? Obviously, Martin putting himself in a good position. Bagnaia looked like he was riding pretty tight in that one as well, which, is pretty reminiscent of what we saw in the last season.
Yeah, it was your typical weekend we've seen, kind of rinse and repeat since India, I suppose, where Saturday is Jorge Martin, Pecco's is on Sunday. Pecco pulls out 3 points overall. It's kind of like, that would have been, if this was with 3 rounds to go, I think Pecco comes away with 2 points more than when Martin in overall. I think that's just how it goes. It's just one of those weekends where, as this weekend, because it was last weekend, championship has to be settled. Martin did everything in his power. We talked about this yesterday between us, that Pecco made a very silly mistake in the sprint of when he got passed by Jorge Martin, he tries to run Martin like out of road and pick him up to the curb, and basically cost themselves more positions. And at a track that's so hard to overtake, it was kind of needless, because in the end it's cost him more and it's given himself more work to do on Sunday. And he's put, again, like we've talked about Valencia, nobody wants to go to Valencia with a championship at risk of losing. Like, so for me, Martin did his job perfectly on Saturday. Obviously there was the whole shenanigans in free practice early on when they were following each other, and well, that was actually on Friday, but the whole kind of weekend was building towards the sprint, because as we've seen this year so far, Martin in the sprint has just been out of this world. He just has the feeling straight away he can go and he can just get up to speed, whereas Pecco isn't that rider. He seems to kind of want to, he's more of a rider that is, if it's a sprint, kind of isn't much to be really worried about, but when it's a full race, it's he's so much better on the long runs, the tires, management, and just a bit of everything. So in fairness, Martin, he did everything he could on Saturday, gave himself pretty much the best chance of getting a potential championship on Sunday. And to be fair, that was kind of his only, that's all he could do. He did pretty much exactly what he could do, barring any mistakes from Bagnaia in the sprint and costing himself even more points. I think it was probably one of the best results you could have hoped for if you were neutral or a Jorge Martin fan on Saturday. And I think it built a kind of narrative for Sunday that we could actually have a championship battle.
Yeah, it pretty much did. I mean, you make a really good point by saying that Bagnaia made a silly mistake. I don't know why he tried to pick up Martin. To me, I'm not sure about you, but I feel like Bagnaia was too focused on Martin. Like, over the whole weekend, he didn't like Martin following him free practice. Well, you need to do a lap to get through to Q2. Martin's already done one. Even if Martin follows behind you and does a better lap than you, he's already in front of you anyway. So, like, it doesn't matter. Like, he seemed to me like he was too focused on Martin. Like, if I was, well, it's hard to say if I was in Bagnaia's situation, but in my opinion, what he should have done was he should have just focused on getting the result he needed, and that was it. He should have just focused on top fives in both races. That's all he needs. Like, forget what Martin does, because Martin has to win. When you're trying to defend the championship, just assume that he's going to. There's no point trying to fight him for it, because obviously Martin's not a dirty rider, but at the same time, like, if you try and be too aggressive with him, he might let the brake off. It's like, oh well, if we touch and you go down, it's it's one of those things. Why risk that happening or whatever? Why get caught up in his mind games and stuff as well in free practice? Like, it was a bit light-hearted, fun and games, wasn't it? In free practice, Tardozzi was getting involved and stuff, standing in front of Martin's bike and stuff. It was slightly jovial. It wasn't completely serious, but I felt like he just sort of let himself get sucked in and almost gave Martin more of a chance, because Martin's like, well, if I can mess you up and then I can try and win the races, you might make a mistake. It just feels like it fired him up more. And then, I don't know, I just feel like for Bagnaia, it was a mistake to get too dragged into Martin's games. He should have just focused more on the job at hand, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, pretty much. I think if you're in the Pecco camp coming into this weekend, you are drilling into his head at every given opportunity. Do your part, everything else will fall into position. Do not be thinking of, what if Zarco is behind me? What will Zarco do? Or is Alex Marquez going to try and play interference? Or will Digit trying to be, just focus on yourself. Don't worry about anything else. It'll all kind of work out. If you do your part, there's enough of a gap. He could have won the championship like that. And I think that was pretty much exactly what he needed to have that mindset coming in. To say he struggled on Friday is kind of, he doesn't struggle. He just doesn't. He focused on other things on a Friday. So he's been through Q1 a couple of times this year. It's not really something that phases him in him as much. Obviously, it will be better for his whole weekend if he does go straight to Q2. But the whole reason why he's probably so good on Sunday is because he spends more Friday on long runs, on a set of mediums that he's run for like 30 laps, and he knows what it's going to be like at the end of at the last 5 laps, and when it's low on fuel and the tire is getting to the very end. So it's part of why he's champion, is why he kind of struggles on the Friday. It's probably part of the reason why Martin hasn't won as many full length races, because he's so good on Friday and Saturday. So it's changed the whole complex this year of just the way the certain sessions require a fast lap as a mini qualifying session to get you into directly through. There's certain sessions that are just practice sessions, so it's not like the years gone by where you could kind of build and hold your breath for a lap, qualify fourth, and you have the race pace, and it's all done over the weekend kind of nice and easily. You kind of have to sacrifice some part of your weekend for gains elsewhere. So it's just the way the current format of GP is, and the way you have to be towards the front of the grid and qualifying. You can't qualify ninth anymore and expect to win races. So he did get a bit ruffled on Friday, got kind of joined in the fun of games, but he got a bit unlucky, got a red flag for Miller's crash as he came out of the pits for his first run, got a yellow flag in his last lap. So there was a bit more just to Martin, but I definitely think him running off the track, going onto a really dusty part of the track, trying to lose his tail from Martin, no need. He had Alex Marquez behind him. Martin was already through. It's just not needed. But it was just one of those things where it was kind of all fun and games, but deep down you knew that it would have been a travesty if he didn't manage to find a lap in Q1, and he does go below the lap record in Q1 if I remember correctly. So it was kind of all okay in the end, and in the end then out qualifies Martin on Saturday, so it worked out for him. But his goal always is to focus on Sunday, and that's where the big points run on offer this weekend, as always.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to have worked for him. Obviously, he's won the championship, so
Exactly.
who are we to question his tactics? But it does seem like, especially with the way that MotoGP is now, he's put himself more at risk because not only just in terms of position that you might not get through Q1, it's like you have to lay it all on the line in Q1. So
True.
that's the thing. Like you're doing basically an extra 2 qualifying laps that shouldn't have to do. So you are putting yourself more at risk there because obviously that's ultimately where you're absolutely on the limit. You're more likely to crash than potentially in a race. So there is that element to it as well. But yeah, I think overall it's his tactic, and he said in his sort of post-race interview that he's going to try and work for next season and try to be stronger on the Fridays and the Saturdays. But for now, like it's not really important. He's just going to enjoy himself. But for next year, it's where he's got to make a step because let's face it, if he's facing Marc Marquez next season, you need to be scoring a maximum points in the sprint because you can
He'll have to
guarantee.
be absolutely on it from Thursday morning.
Yeah, he needs to be on it from before he's there. Like he needs to be
Yeah.
like doing laps on the simulator. He needs to be
It
get everything
just
ready.
in terms of what I meant by the Thursday is that he's going to have to be ready for that mental battle that's facing what we would class as an alien. He obviously never
Yeah, that's
battled
true.
Valentino at his height. He never battled Lorenzo, Casey Stoner. So he's kind of up against all these nice guys at the moment of Martin and other riders. But um, Marquez will play the media and orchestrate everything like Valentino did, like riders have in the past. So he'll have a 4-day weekend every week for the next 22 weeks, the next 22 rounds next year. It's going to be so much more, and it's maybe that he's has 2 titles under his belt in GP and stuff. Maybe he's better equipped now for it, but next year he's going to have a task on his hands.
Yeah, I think the whole field is going to have a task on their
Yeah.
hands, quite frankly. And we're also talking about Marquez. We may as well talk about his weekend. Obviously, the last hurrah with Honda. Well, the last one for now. He's made it pretty clear that it they could get back together in the future. Depends on how it plays out and if the bike improves and stuff. I'm sure if the bike becomes competitive, I'm sure it'd be straight back there because clearly there's a very sentimental, emotional part of him. He obviously got the podium in the sprint race, really emotional stuff on the podium there about it. Honda gave him his chance in MotoGP, pretty much throughout the whole class as well. Obviously, pretty much his whole career, right? Even in 125s, he had Repsol on the side of his bike. Like, I know that he was a KTM sort of protege to start with, but like he still had that support of Repsol, which obviously Repsol Honda. Obviously in Moto 2 he jumped up, was on basically literally a Moto 2 bike in Repsol Honda colours, effectively. It was what it was. And obviously did the 2 seasons there, jumps up into MotoGP on the Repsol Honda, 2013 wins the title, then again in 14, 15 happened, 16 obviously then he won the championship again, 17, 18, 19, obviously then there was the whole thing with the incidents and with 20, and obviously it's not been quite the same since, but he's been with Repsol Honda since he was like a really young kid, effectively. Not even, it goes further back than his first MotoGP season, and just that crew as well. Not even like Santi Hernandez was his crew chief in Moto 2. I don't know if he was his crew chief in 125, so I can't remember that far back, but Santi was definitely there in Moto 2, and obviously he was sort of overseen by someone when they first got up into MotoGP. But that crew, that family, he's been there all those years. He's had a lot of success. You could tell it meant a lot to him to try and get one good result for them. And I think it's a shame for him in the main race that it went the way it did, because through pretty much no fault of his own, he was out of the race. And with the way that race played out, it could have been a Marquez podium, potentially a Marquez win. It's the kind of race where he'd take advantage, especially if he thinks someone's a bit weak. But yeah, it was a great race for him, wasn't it, in the sprint, and just overall a nice like last hurrah weekend, and definitely the end of an era kind of thing.
Yeah, it was nice that he got a good result in the sprint because I personally felt then it was going to be a lot harder to do it on Sunday because of the fact that he'd have a lot longer to kind of maintain the speed and maintain the pressure. And on the Honda, it's a sprint where you can kind of do something. You kind of know you can master something over 10 or 12 laps, whereas it's 27, 25 laps. He eventually is going to crash. It's going to happen. So maybe he comes out with a brilliant P4 today. Even with all the crashes and all the incidents, I still don't think he wins. I don't think he beats Dija, who, during some of your points there, I just found out a while ago, is after getting a 3-second penalty for guess what?
Yes, the tyre pressure. I see you've edited the notes.
Yeah, tyre pressure. He's dropped to P4. Binder's gotten a penalty.
Binder's got a penalty too.
No, sorry, Binder's gone up into P3. No, he said a penalty.
Okay.
Binder's got a podium, is what I tried to say. My brain got puzzled there, but we all came into the last 2 rounds thinking we might go to Valencia and the title could be decided by this. Unfortunate, Digi has lost a podium because of it, but it is what it is. I've seen a few bits there from Frankie Carcetti saying that like he was starting in P11. It was a look at a draw what I could do with the tires. There was not much we could try and do. It was either basically go nowhere or have a tire that worked. So it's kind of part of the issue. We will kind of touch later towards the end, final few points and the current state of GP. But so kind of back to the Marquez point, to the fact that he's still probably he might get a podium, and like he might have been P4 today and got Binder's podium. But I don't see him beating Pecco. I don't see him beating Zarco. I don't see him beat any of the Ducatis on actual speed or racecraft, even if it's a track that's slightly unforgiving. He could be one of those riders crashing, and it's just the current way the Honda is. He's like Binder made a mistake in there. I'd imagine Binder had nearly identical moment to Jack. It's just he was kind of quick enough to maybe save it, pick it up and run on, because it's the exact same part of the track. He runs on so much that it's probably just he's changed direction. He's had a little moment. He's like, I'm not crashing, I'm going straight. Whereas Jack was maybe a bit more stubborn and again was thinking, I can't afford to run off. I have to try and.
Same thing happened yesterday as well, pretty much. He ran. That's why he lost to Luton Martin.
Exactly, yeah. So
he didn't go as wide, but he ran wide.
Again, another moment, and in the sprint, you're probably going a bit hotter, so you maybe have a bit more temp in the tire. So maybe it's just a bit of a main race kind of issue where that's what cost them more. But in terms of Marquez, it was going to be a tough weekend for him. A stop and start track like this was always going to suit him more, but like nonetheless, the Honda's still nothing. Like he came third in the sprint yesterday. The next Honda was in P18. His teammate got injured into turn 8 on Friday morning. Didn't race for the rest of the weekend. The Honda is just in a mess, and we've kind of had one of the worst seasons if you're a Marquez fan for a while, because for a while you can kind of go back a bit. Go, right, he was injured. He then came back from injury, then he went back out again, then the arm wasn't right, so it's constant. Marquez isn't right, Marquez is back, he's still not right. But now for the whole year, he's been here for the most part after Portimao, but he's been there for the most part, as you've seen that he wasn't able to make anything happen with that Honda. So I think this has been a worse year for Marquez fans, because of the fact that it's kind of a realisation that he was never going to do much this year, and the fact he ended up miles off in the championship, crashed out of so many races, kept crashing. Sachsenring was a nightmare, one of his worst weekends. And the fact that he has have to leave Ducati, or leave for Ducati, is a massive, massive shame for Honda, because there's still more titles to be won there from that. Still a combination that could win it. He has said he will go back if things change, but I don't see it, to be honest. I don't know about you, but I just don't see him riding a Ducati and then thinking, yeah, let's go back to the Honda.
I mean, if the Honda starts winning again, I'm sure he will. I'm sure he'll be pretty quick to go back, but I can't see Marini and Mir developing it into a race-winning bike particularly. So, yeah, I guess we'll see how that one goes. But yeah, obviously the last race for Mark on the Honda didn't end the best way, unfortunately, for him. So we may as well talk about the main race now, once we're actually moving on from the sprint. And obviously, initially, the start was slightly different than yesterday, because Maverick Vinales was actually demoted due to a penalty in warm-up for ignoring the meatball flag. Now, I didn't watch warm-up, but I have seen the clips. Obviously, his bike sort of blew up in turn 1, and then he does pull off later on the lap. I don't know how early he got the meatball flag, but I don't know. Seems slightly harsh to me. If
he did 3 corners with the, basically was what it was, from where he went out and when he went off, there was 3 corners. So that's the level of leniency that he was given.
Okay, I guess so. But on the first clip I've seen, the bike blows up, but by the time he looks behind him, the smoke has cleared. So I don't know. That seems a little harsh to me, actually. To be honest, unless if the flag was waving immediately, then yeah, I guess so. He should have got straight off the track, but maybe he didn't see the flag for a corner or two. But either way, obviously that changed the complexion of the race, because that put Bagnaia on pole position, and we know Bagnaia with the whole shot is pretty good, and he did take the lead early on. Martin immediately pretty much got up to second place, and the hunt was on. But going into turn 1, was it lap 2 or lap 3?
3, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was lap 3, but pretty early into the race, we almost had an exact carbon copy of what we had last week with Bagnaia almost going to the back of Di Antonio. Martin did the same with Bagnaia, got sucked in with the wake into turn 1, almost hit Bagnaia at the back. That would have been a controversial end to the championship if that had gone down, although if they both fell off, then I suppose Bagnaia would have still won, so it wouldn't have been that controversial, I guess, but it was so close to contact. Martin goes off the track and drops himself straight back down into P8, and from there it looked like the championship was pretty much over because Bagnaia is leading the race, so he's too high up. Martin's got to find his way back through. I personally thought he probably could get back through, but of course didn't end up being that way. Made some pretty aggressive passes, pretty aggressive pass on I think Alex Marquez. I think he was quite clean but pretty aggressive, but unfortunately it went wrong when he passed Mark. Obviously, he sort of tries it into turn 4, gets a decent bit alongside. I actually thought the commentators were quite harsh with what they said. They were like saying it was never on, but he pretty much got along. He was just slightly too far back. It wasn't like as crazy as they made out it was. They acted like he'd come from absolutely miles back, but he was relatively close. He just didn't quite. It was still a mistake, and he bodged the pass, obviously, but I don't think it was quite as egregious as people were saying. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but just not enough for Mark to be able to see him pick up, which obviously is on Martin. He's got to get along enough alongside. Wipes him and Marquez out. Pretty big high side for Marquez. Fortunately, was okay by the looks of it, but that was it. That was the championship over, and I'd love to see what you think of those two incidents, but just a shame. It's a shame it ended that way because there was still like 20-odd laps left of the race. Bit of a damp squib. That was it, championship over, and then, at least for a while after that, the race became a bit of a procession, really.
Yeah, get rid of the wings for turn 1. That was, we've seen at Mugello this year, Alex Marquez almost skittling people at 160 miles an hour to turn 1. Last week out we saw, guaranteed, there's been other ones this year in the mid-pack we haven't seen. It's like on TNT Sports, which is what we both would be watching, you have a current rider who's been a test rider for a team who knows he's at the same, we'll say, level of experience with the current bikes as Danny Pedrosa in terms of testing. Maybe he's slightly behind now because he's been out of it for a bit, but he still has the knowledge. And he says when you're in the wake of something, it has like a vacuum effect where it pulls you in towards the bike. So, like Pecco said after Qatar, didn't break any bit later. I just wanted to be close to him, and it said it just didn't stop. It just kept getting dragged in. I had to pick the bike up. I was lucky I didn't smash us both off, basically. Exactly. I didn't hear anything from our team, but like, you know, for fact, it's the exact same thing where he's braked, tried to maybe think, right, if I can be close to him, get a run and just absolutely give him the block pass of all block passes into turn 2, maybe turn 4. Like, these riders are thinking so far ahead that he's obviously not thinking, well, maybe I might get pulled into this corner here. He's thinking I have to be literally on his back wheel so that I can try something. Like, Pecco's not easy to pass by any means. So, and then it's one of those things where he's getting literally pulled in by the drag and the wake behind Pecco to the point where it's getting so dangerous, and we're going to see huge accidents from this. And because it happens at the end of straights where they're going so fast that the air is being completely disturbed, it's going to be a helicopter crash. It's literally going to be a ridiculous mistake. It will look a ridiculous mistake, should I say, and it's going to be a terrible crash. So for the first one, not much Martin could have done. He picks the bike up, and it's kind of lucky that Martin doesn't make more contact with Pecco, because when Martin's after picking it up, you imagine a bit more contact to Pecco. Pecco would probably be the one that would fall, and Martin might just go straight on into the gravel. And then what would be the situation if Martin is taking Pecco out and manages to continue and is down at like P12? If he wins the championship, does he like get a what happens then? I always wondered, because if you take your title rival out blatantly or by a big mistake, and you can't just get a one long lap penalty for that, because you've won the title by taking him out. So in my eyes, it's a bit of a grey area of kind of, I don't know how the rule book would handle that. But the second one, I feel like
the championship, if I remember. I think if Los Caparossi's in charge anyway.
Well, yeah, if it was 40 years ago this way, or 30 years ago for Loris.
He is a safety officer. He'd say, "Yeah, safe."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's clean. That was clean back in my day. It was for him. If you don't know the incident one, but look up Loris Caparossi in Harada. Was it 94? 98?
98.
Yeah, it was Rossi was won it.
Rossi won the race.
The most blatant takeout you'll ever see in your life, and it's.
You think Lucia was bad? Like
this is outrageous. So it's hilarious. Just it's hilarious that it stood because he's like Harad is getting his knee down and like Cabrosi's accelerating towards the corner, just turns directly into the corner and just runs up the inside, smashes into him and puts him into the gravel. Runs wide, Rossi goes through, wins the race. Caprossi wins it on the championship by the points. And I don't know exactly what the penalty was. It must have been a penalty because it's in no means was it not.
I don't think he did. I don't think he got a penalty.
Ridiculous. It was so bad. It's one of those things where like to this day you still don't understand like what the stewards were doing or what happened. But in terms of the Martin Marquez one, I feel Mark is, again, if he's unsighted fully, completely, fair enough. You can't really argue the point that he's maybe a bit stubborn. But the first few times I've watched it, it feels like he's kind of leans on Martin a small bit. Martin is committed, and it's kind of happened. It's aggression from Martin. It was going to happen. Marquez took out Bezecchi very, very silly at the start of the race. If you haven't seen that one, I watched replays back. He just rode into the side of him. There's been some serious words from the VR46 crew and camp, as you'd imagine, when it's you know who's at fault, but it was a blatant. How he gets it's more.
I actually haven't seen that. If I saw that it was investigated, but I
jump on Twitter there and you'll see it straight away because it's everywhere. He just rides through him. It's a silly mistake, and it's a real fast crash with Bezecchi. Bezecchi said he does no point wasting time talking about this person. Again, when it comes to anything Rossi related, comes to anything to do with Marc Marquez, it's always going to be a kind of a war word. So it was just a horrible incident. And how he got away without a penalty for that is mind boggling, because he's like just gone for a move that it's a lot worse than what Martin does in my eyes. Like Martin is halfway alongside him, and it just is Marquez is either a bit stubbornly turning and trying to squeeze him, or is a bit unsighted, and unfortunately Martin has to pick the bike up, and that's where the high side comes from Mark. But it's
oh yeah, I see it now. I've got it up.
Worse, or what do you think? Is it worse? Do you think it's worse than Martin's error? I think it is by a mile.
Yeah, probably.
He just rides through him.
It's like the Lopez Dixon incident. It's not probably quite as bad as that, but yeah.
I don't know. For me, I think it's very bad.
He could have picked the bike up a little bit, to be fair, but yeah, it definitely just kind of just ride into him.
Yeah, but in terms of Martin, he has to try, and he's trying, and when the mistake happened at turn one, I knew he was going to crash. Essentially, it was on the cards. It was just one of those things where, like some people thinking, oh, maybe he can come back. He's not going to overtake everyone and get through cleanly. There was going to be a mistake. He was going to go over the limit.
He was pretty much there, to be fair. If he'd got past Marquez, it'd have been behind Zarco.
Yeah, to be fair,
Zarco was behind Bagnaia, so Zarco would have left him through, obviously. So
yeah, well, it was close, but it was just, I felt like he had just seen red, like it was Marquez kind of Argentina kind of. He was just.
I think he'd have shredded his tyre. I think that's what happened.
I think that would have been.
I think he could have got back through, but I think he would have destroyed the tyre.
Definitely, yeah. But to kind of finish up with the incident, I think from one we all know it was error that called, and like anyone who thinks error isn't a bad thing it's just silly, really. That the fact that week in week out we have ride-out devices failures, we have all these silly things, and again we'll kind of cover this after the championship and the KTMs and stuff, but I suppose that's probably everything really on the incidents. Just again, it's a silly feature of the sport at the moment, the aero, because it causes so many issues. It just doesn't help Michelin at all, and it doesn't help racing. Again, I know it's prototype racing, and if they want to build a massive machine of aero ability and all this, it's amazing, but I want to see good racing. That's kind of the bottom line for me.
Yeah, it's not MotoGP time trial, is it?
This is not MotoGP.
It's MotoGP. Yeah, it's MotoGP racing. But yeah, it's so we're pretty much in agreement then that it was kind of a bit of a race incident between Martin and Marquez. Marquez perhaps did lean on Martin a bit, but I don't think maybe he could see him. But
yeah,
you do sense it. I imagine he
100%. You do feel it right, and it's turn 4. You know that's one of the main opportunities to overtake.
Yeah. So yeah, it's one of those things, but. It was a shame that the championship had to end that way, but I think, like you say, as soon as the mistake was made at turn 1, it was always going to end in disaster, really, because he was going to have to just go away for the limit, which it was just a shame that it did play out that way. And then after that, the race kind of there was still like 22 laps to go, so it's kind of like, oh, okay, there's a decent bit left in the race. He could have fought his way back through if he's a bit more patient potentially, because afterwards, the race became pretty chaotic because ultimately, as we were sort of watching this happen, as we were sort of watching Martin overtake Vinales, we actually missed the crash initially. We cut to it very late on, but we cut to a pass for the lead as Binder overtook Bagnaia. He'd been closing up to him. He overtook him. And then it actually turned out later that Bagnaia had let Binder through. It's shown in the replay. He just looked over his shoulder and let him through. That was actually before Martin had crashed, but obviously Bagnaia maybe knew that there's Binder behind, just thought he'd let him through rather than having a risking it. Also, from Bagnaia's point of view, if Martin's still behind you, that's actually a very smart move to let Binder go and let him pull away because Martin's got to try and win the race. So, maybe they were still thinking of that because obviously Martin wasn't in the race at that point as far as he was aware. He didn't know he'd fallen off yet. So, it was a pretty good play there. But even still, Binder took the lead. Very shortly afterwards, Miller took the lead, which led us with a KTM 1-2. I don't know about you, Dill, but I was thinking, this is it then now. KTM's win streak is over. They're definitely winning this race because Bagnaia's not going to risk anything now because, well, at that point, obviously he didn't know. But once he found out, he probably wasn't going to risk an injury. Maybe he was going to go for the win, but it didn't look like he had the pace anyway compared to the KTMs. It looked like he was struggling a little bit. You've got one KTM in the lead who has been rapid basically the whole weekend. And basically his issue has been being stuck and overtaken by Ducatis. So he's finally in front of the Ducatis. Got his teammate as a back marker, but not a back marker, sorry, like as a wingman, sort of behind him. And I was thinking KTM 1-2, pretty much sealed on at this point. I'm sure KTM will probably start to think that too, but as it happened, obviously Binder, but basically I think we were watching the replay of something. It might have been the Martin crash. We were watching the replay. All of a sudden we cut back to the live feed. And Binder's P6 all of a sudden for the lead. He runs wide at, like turn 11. He almost loses the front to split the bike up, goes all the way to the long lap penalty, and rejoins in P6. And then a few laps later, at the same corner, we see a KTM tumbling through the gravel, and it's Miller. The same incident pretty much, except he crashed instead of just being able to pick up the bike and running wide. And that was it. KTM went from easy 1-2, well, not easy, but pretty much sealed on 1-2, at least as far as I was concerned, to no podium at all.
Should have been an easy one too if they did their job correctly. It's typical Miller. I'm going to start with Miller because
100%.
It's like I'm a big fan of Miller and I do like him and I actually want him to do well, but unfortunately it's just typical Jack Miller, I'm afraid.
Actually, didn't he crash at that same corner last year? Actually,
probably. I know like, 2 years ago he's on the podium, but
yeah, is that when he was battling with Morbidelli?
Yeah, like he goes well here, and again he was having a very good weekend. Had a bad crash on Friday, but when I saw him crash, and I saw the gesticulating to himself in the gravel of like how angry he was, and you're like, well, you've been here before. Like it's like. The commentary thing is saying, "Oh, Miller knows this situation well. He's been here before, but like he's been here before and thrown away like by shredding a tire. Like he's not and he was on to break a record of the first rider to win on 3 different classes. Imagine Jack Miller having that record when the likes of Valentino didn't do it, Lorenzo didn't do it, Maverick is still trying. So there's been so many people out there who haven't managed to do it. So." Imagine that list of historic names, and then Jack Miller is the one to do it. So he might still do it, maybe next year. But for fair enough, Binder makes a mistake. It's so easily done. The track's gone cold, but like again, Jack, he always does this, like where he's doing well and he'll just throw it down the road. I think he did it a couple of times he did it such a bad weekend at Le Mans at the start of the season. If you remember where he blamed his sprint race crash for a bad tire decision, and then crashed on the right tire decision in the race. So he's a bit of a crasher. The way he rides, I always feel is just he's always like overloading the front, and he always has these kind of similar crashes and stuff. And when he's on it, he's brilliant. Just the fact that the matter is he's just not as good as Binder in my eyes. His 1 lap speed is very much his folklore kind of stand-up point, that he's brilliant in that sense, but it's just overall the full package has never been there with Jack. And for example, like last year the year before last, when he went racing, or might have been last year actually, he did it twice where he raced in the Aussie Superbike Championship on the V4, and like one of the rounds he actually crashed out of, like, so like if you're doing one of those things, like I'm not saying you don't crash, like, but sure you're not on your limit that you crash, like in a way, like, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong in seeing it around that way, but it's just
I think you're right. Like when you're coming to do a wild card at
yeah,
a national level race, like okay, there is an element of expectation that like people probably expect you to win because you're a MotoGP rider, and there is that. You've got to try to deal with that, but at the same time, you can't be crashing out. Like that's much worse a look. Like
yeah,
and
definitely.
it is Miller written all over, isn't it? To make these kind of mistakes. He's done it throughout his career out of good positions. He's won a few races. Again, I kind of agree with you that when the commentators like he's been in this position before, it's like yeah, he kind of has like a couple of times, but he's not really won that many races, and he's definitely not won them in dominant fashion, particularly. And well, he has when they've been wet, but like
he's won one race in dominant
yeah,
faction. That was Motegi.
yeah,
The other ones have been.
yeah. He's not won a normal race ever. Like
No,
has he? Like which I suppose this wasn't a normal race in fairness, but yeah, it's not like he's not been out front leading races a lot. Obviously, he didn't inherit the lead of Assen until very close to the end. He didn't inherit
Rossi should have won that one.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that was obviously a very weird red flag, wet, dry, like kind of weird transition race. See, Jerez 21, he wasn't anywhere near winning until obviously Quartararo got arm pump. Obviously, then he won at Le Mans, which again was another weird flag to flag race. He won obviously then at Motegi the year after, right? And that was another strange race. So he's not a serial race winner like they were acting like. So yeah, it is. It's not unexpected to see Miller crash out of these positions, and he's had a pretty poor season in general. Really, he's had some highlights, but he's been miles off his teammate overall, and it's pretty much just ended it in that same fashion, unfortunately.
I think it's been a good season for Binder in terms of how much he's had over Jack, because Jack's come in and the bike has made a step, and he's been really good over one lap, and kind of, to be fair, he's gone missing for so many parts of the season where like he's just down in P16 and like the whole carbon frame came and it was like, oh, we're going to make a step, and they make half step forward and kind of like one step back, and it's just a messy season for Miller. And I think, to be honest, right, for most people it's better than he probably was going to. A lot of people thought he'd go and would be like points would have been a good result from was what a lot of people thought, that because he was on the best bike in the grid and because he was in the factory team, that's kind of how he was getting podiums and the odd win and stuff like that. But it's still a mystery his season why he's been that far off.
Binder was pretty much there week in, week out, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the difference.
If you out of 100%, you'd imagine Binder's probably got about 90% out of a season. Obviously, had a few failures, like a right height device failure, and a few other weird kind of incidents throughout the season where he's had bad results and the odd kind of crash and stuff. But Jack has just like gone missing for like periods of the season where like he's qualified, hasn't made out a Q1, P12 in the sprint, and maybe P9 in a kind of a nutritional race on a Sunday, and that's kind of his weekend. It's just it's Jack Miller to a T, and with Binder being so good, I think people didn't understand when Binder was up against Oliveira, because Oliveira is really, really, really strong, and on that equipment, everybody thought Binder should be doing more against Oliveira. But the fact we put a multiple race winner in Jack in there, and someone who's been in the class, he's definitely one of the most experienced when he came off the Ducati, brought all the wealth of knowledge of that bike over, and Binder's demolished him for most part of the season. When he's on it, he's there. He's in the back of shot with Binder, but he's never. I can't think of any weekend at all this season where I've gone, Jack is so much quicker than Binder this weekend. There's been no point this season that I can remember anyway. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there was one.
Portimao, but they were still pretty close there.
Yeah, but didn't Binder like beat him in all the races?
I think Miller did well in the sprint, but yeah, I can't remember. But that was basically Miller's best weekend. It was literally the first one.
Yeah,
that's like the crazy part.
It's a weird season. I think it's been a good season overall for KTM because Brad has been so consistent. He's had so many Q2 visits and he's been thereabouts, and he's had great race speed, and overall it's been a good season. And to be honest, it would have been a brilliant season if he went out today and wins it just on a standard. Because like last year, he should have won it. Well, he not should have won it. He had a great chance of winning last year. Showed great speed, but this year then in the lead, of course, easy track to make a mistake at. It's a horrible track to race in these conditions, and made a small mistake. And you can defend Jack and say he's made a small mistake, which he has, but one of them's crashed, one of them ran wide. So it sums up their seasons that when Binder makes mistakes, he still gets a podium because he finished third with the penalty, and Jack has barrel rolled himself through the gravel to finish the season. So it just shows the gap in performance and skill probably between the two riders, and it's a reason why. I look at Jack and I think he's done very well for himself being in the factory KTM team and the factory Ducati team. Like I kind of think I'm like, how did he ever even get them seats? But here he is now, and he's going to have next year, and I'd imagine probably shipped off. Then I don't think he'll be kept after 24.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It depends how well Acosta gets on. But
yeah, true.
Yeah, Marquez will be available at the end of next season again. If he wins on a Ducati, he might want to try something else again anyway. So he could be potentially available. So yeah, it does put Miller at a little bit of risk. But whilst we talk about the KTMs and obviously their fall, as we've got it written down in the notes, Brad Binder, obviously he made that mistake initially, dropped down in the pack to like 6th place or whatever. Whilst trying to get back through, he pulled a very aggressive pass. Well, it wasn't really a pass, was it? It was he kind of barged into Alex Marquez. Something we have seen from Binder pretty regularly throughout his entire MotoGP career. But even this season, when we're trying to say, but like they're doing pretty, like he's been doing pretty well this season. He's been there pretty much week in, week out. But he's still been making these mistakes where he still actually just goes a bit over the line with his passes. He bashes people out the way. Obviously, he bashed Alex Marquez out the way today. Picked up a penalty. Served it in what I thought was quite a clever way to pass Vinales and then let him back through to technically drop a position. Obviously, that's a debate of its own whether you should be allowed to do that or not, but that's how he did it. But again, it's Miller making a botched pass on someone, knocking them wide and picking up a penalty. It's something that it's not even that that far away that last happened. In Mandalika, he did it twice. Like he generally did the same thing twice to people. Obviously, everyone makes mistakes when making passes every so often. So we saw it with Martin today. He's not picked up. Well, actually, I think he has picked up a penalty for a botched overtaking attempt earlier on in the year to Austria. But you know what I mean? Like everybody makes these mistakes occasionally, but Binder seems to do it pretty regularly, and it's something that it's probably his biggest weakness. I would say is that he doesn't sometimes know when to just to dial it back a touch and just to make sure that the pass is clean. So I know he gets a bit desperate and does these aggressive things, and obviously then the penalty as well. He picked up a needless penalty. Yeah, right. It didn't affect him too much in the end because he served it quite well. But yeah, just I don't know. It keeps happening, and it's definitely a problem.
Yeah, he's very aggressive. He's one of the most aggressive riders, so he's always going to probably have one or two of these moments through a season. But I felt this year he's probably had more. And I think the fact of the matter is, when last year he qualified 14th and finished 6th, he's like, oh, that was a great race. I overtook XYZ. I had the speed. He had such advantage. Where now he's on he's on a better bike. I don't know where his classic compared to last year's bike, a good chunk better. But now he's battling P3, 4, 5, and 6 instead of finishing 6th after battling 11th, 12th, and 10th. So he's kind of in a different area on track, I feel. And I feel like, for as always in any motorsport, the further up you grid, harder it is to overtake. So I think putting on top of the fact that you have the tyre pressures, you have the bikes are just not easy to overtake on. They're just so hard to have racing side by side with. And I think like if we had a bit more of a 2017-18 regs at the moment, I think he'd be making overtakes every single lap in every corner. Maybe he wouldn't be winning races, but he would be so good in the battle. I think he'd be able to overtake anyone anywhere. He's just that good, and I think he has that level. But the issue is, I think, is just maybe the KTM isn't exactly where he needs it, and he doesn't still always get the front row that he needs to qualify to give himself the opportunity to win a race. And I think, to be honest with you, I think as well there's a bit of disrespect to small bit, and I'm a huge Binder fan. I've been a massive fan since 16 when he won a Jerez from the last position on the grid that day. That was a fabulous race from him, and I've always been a huge fan. When he moved up to Moto 2, the way he was drifted on the Red Bull bike there was beautiful, and I thought when he got up to GP he's going to do something special. Wins his third race in Brno, third race.
What is it? Third, because there's the 2 Jerez races and then
double Jerez, yeah, exactly, yeah. Over year. And I thought he'd kick on. Of course, then he's been kind of struggling overall to get a whole weekend together, and I thought this weekend, after his good sprint, gets the lead when Pecco kind of leads him through. Turns out Pecco led him through because he said his front tyre felt terrible and he needed someone in front of him to bring the temperature up. And that was the big reason. So
there you go then.
That's what he looks behind and doesn't kind of like get past. He wanted someone there. And again, maybe in his head it's like, if some guy tears off the rope up the road who has better speed and wants to win one race a season, it'll win the championship for me. I don't need to win. And in the end, he wins it. But it was a kind of a coy race, I suppose, in a way, from Bagnaia with everything on the line. But back to Brad, I feel like in India, didn't put any silly moves on anyone. In Austria, didn't risk anything on Pecco. He's battling like the likes of Alex Marquez in 6th. He'll risk everything because he just doesn't care. Luca Ramini doesn't care. If he's not battling for the front positions, does a lack of care and a lack of kind of respect for his actions in a way. I suppose maybe that's just a mindset. Maybe a bit of frustration comes out. I definitely think he loses the rag a bit when he's on the bike. I think that's what makes him very good in a way, though. So it's kind of he has to balance it perfectly, where you need to get the right kind of margin, the right kind of mixture and stuff of extreme aggression, but to be clean at the same time, because he's had more incidents this year than he's ever had in his career, I'd say. And I think there's a couple of reasons for it, but definitely he's not innocent in that as well. So it's something he'll have to work with KTM to get the bike better in terms of getting him in positions where he doesn't need to be as aggressive as much. But it's gonna be hard for him to kind of change that, because in modern GP, if you want to make any overtake, you have to be absolutely on the limit always.
Do you think it's an element of then when he's behind someone like Alex Marquez, he thinks just get out of the way, you're holding me up kind of thing?
100%.
Right. Whereas when he's behind someone like Bagnaia, he's like, right, he's on the limit anyway, trying to keep up with him. Whereas when he's just made a mistake, he's like, well, I was race winning in pace, get out of my way. I think it's like that.
It's exactly like we go back to Argentina and Marquez, where he was so much quicker, he didn't show anyone any respect because he was like 4 seconds a lap quicker, and you can break 100 meters deep, and you can do this to you. But when you have that sort of closing speed, and when you have that, in I suppose in Binder's sense, when he thinks he has so much more speed, he's going to make the move earlier and risk it faster and try and make something happen quicker to get himself back to the Jorge Martins, the Peckles, and the like at the front. So I think the races where he started out at the front this year, he's been incredibly clean, he's been respectful, everything's fine. It's when he's had a bad start, the right device has failed off the line, whether he's gotten picked up in turn 1, it's the races where he's gone backwards, where he's had to go forward very quickly and aggressively, that he's had these incidents and he's gone over the limit. Like, he had a penalty in Mandalika, penalty today, definitely had a couple of other throughout the seasons for a few misdemeanors. Like, if you go back to Jerez in the sprint in the main race, look how clean he was there and aggressive, but he didn't have to do it for P10, he was doing it for the lead. So I think it's maybe it's just maybe a small bit of ignorance in his head, that he knows that he should be at the front, and he knows that on the day the bike should be at the front, and then when he is behind a 4th-tier Ducati, he's thinking, Jesus Christ, why am I here? Like, this guy is holding me up, and he just gets frustrated and just lets the brake off in a way, I suppose, is probably the way I see it.
Yeah, I think that's probably about right with what it is, because it does seem like when he's got this, it's more when it's got the red mist. Like, he made a mistake trying to pass Marini in Mandalika, and then obviously he then absolutely rams Oliveira out the way later on, thinking that he shouldn't be in front of me anyway. So yeah, it is one of those things. I think it definitely gets worse when he gets a bit more annoyed, which does happen, but it seems to be Binder quite regularly, more than most of the other riders. But Fabio, Digi and Antonio, obviously the rider that, as of right now, doesn't have a confirmed MotoGP seat. Looked like his career was pretty much over halfway through the season, but the last few rounds, ever since Phillip Island, he has been unbelievable, fighting at the front every week, winning obviously last time out at Qatar, almost winning again today, just not quite been able to beat the two riders ahead of, well, not the two riders, obviously Bagnaia ahead of him, obviously finishing second on the road. But whilst recording this podcast, obviously, like you mentioned, he has received a penalty, so he's actually finished 4th place. But even still, I think his sort of end of the season has been so good, I don't think it matters too much, right? He knows he finished second on the road today. He's not going to get the trophy to take home with him. That's a bit of a shame, but ultimately, when you're trying to get that result, trying to get the job is what he's trying to get at the end of the day, that's what's being focused. And do you think he's now in the driving seat for that VR46 Ducati ride? Because I certainly think it's his to lose now at this point, because of the last few rounds he's pulled out, they'd be silly to not take him, because if they take the settings that Carcetti's put into the Ducati, he should be a top flight rider. He's probably an upgrade on Marini at this point now. They're actually probably winning because of the way that this has panned out.
It's already done in my eyes. I think it's just been dragged out. It's a bit weird because Valentino was interviewed on the grid and he said we'll make a decision tomorrow. They're testing on Tuesday. It's a bit. I know he's always been one of the more laid back guys, and there's the stories from back when he was teammates with Colin Edwards that but he could get up out off the couch and kind of half asleep and jump on. There's letters go straight out and race, and that's the way he was. Whereas Edwards had like a whole hours of procedures to get himself in the position to race. So he's always been a bit laid back. Always kind of was never very good on Friday, built towards the Sunday. So maybe in his post career of management and stuff like that, it's kind of gone in the same direction. That he's kind of laid back with his decisions. I'd imagine after he's won in Qatar, if it wasn't even done before Qatar, ever since Luke has been known to be going to Honda, I think Digi has been probably. I think the win massively swings in his favour, and I think up until then they're probably going. And I think as well. The fact of the matter is that Aldeguer, back to the Moto 2 man, everyone's kind of thinking he's probably going to get that seat until they find out that his contract has a baked in clause that if a MotoGP team come in for you, it's a €1 million or thereabout fee to break the contract. And essentially, if you go and get Digia, who's no contract, $250,000 you're probably paying for him. And imagine if you do buy out. For me and Aldeguer, you're probably going to be looking at at least 150 to 200,000 in fee there. So you're giving up $1 million just to get another rider. And to be fair, you're getting an unknown kind of prospect, a very young rider as well in for me. And so you're getting a proven race winner. Digia now has won in all classes, so he's won across everything he's ridden in a way. So he's proved he can adapt. He's proved that with the right setting, the bike works fine for him. And he was so good again today. If it wasn't for the stupid track that is Valencia, he wins that race so easily. Because he had so much speed, he was so good all weekend. I was watching him all weekend, just watching him on Friday, and just the red helmets coming up on screen, thinking, "Geez, he's had such a good end to the season." And there's a kind of whole media thing going on of, well, I have a set of letters here and a helmet, like I might be testing somebody on Tuesday, but like if it doesn't end up being Digia, Jesus, it will be some curveball out of left field. Like, and Vietti isn't ready. They're not, in my eyes, they're not going to pay the $1 million. And $1.25 million, we'll say, with a contract for me and Aldeguer. I don't think that's worth it. Like that's huge money for a rookie and someone so young as well. So I think that it's 90%. I'd imagine right now it's signed, sealed, delivered, everything. It's just we haven't got the press announcement. So I'd imagine first thing tomorrow morning we'll probably see pictures of Valentino or Uccio shaking hands with Digia, VR46 signs Fabio Di Gianantonio, and 2024 is set, I'd say, in that sense, because like we still haven't, like the season's done. We know Luke is leaving VR46, but we haven't heard anything anywhere where he's going in terms of an official announcement. But like he's been banging on how he's getting a factory seat and he wants to build a bike, so we obviously know it's going to be the factory HRC seat at Repsol. So yeah, it's nailed on. He's been brilliant. His race today was so good. I was actually quite sad when I saw that he got a penalty, because when he came into Park Farm, he said it's one of his worst podiums ever, because Pecker just basically defended everywhere he could on the last lap, and he said, I couldn't pass him even though I was quicker. And he said he came out like halfway through the lap, he was shaking his head because he kind of knew himself it was done, and he came out the last corner, the head in the tank, and he's quite emotional in a way, but he's a good character. And I'd actually, as the season's gone on, I've wanted him to stay a bit more, and I'm really happy he's found this form, and I'm happy that he's realistically going to be riding on a Portamina VR46 Ducati next year.
It's a good job he didn't win, isn't it, actually? Imagine if he'd won and then
I did think that when you were making the point, that'd be a kick in the teeth, right, if you had won and you lose it.
Yeah. It's not even like you've won and then like you've dropped a second. He would have dropped off the podium still, because the difference would have probably still been enough to drop to fourth. So yeah, it's that's a good job he didn't win, I guess, but a shame for him that he got the tyre penalty. I mean, it's one of those things, obviously, with the tyre pressures. And whilst we talk about the tyre pressures, the last point we have down here is sort of just the problems that MotoGP has at the minute. Obviously, we're at the end of the season now. It's time to sort of have a little look at how this season's played out. We said last year that the aero definitely was ruining the racing. I think this year it was a step better. I think it was a little bit better this year, and that's probably just down to the fact that the riders are more used to racing with the aero and racing each other. So I think the racing was a little bit better this year than last year in general. But even still, we had some snooze fests. We had some faster riders just not be able to make passes because of the aero. We've had the issues with the ride height devices. We've had so many issues with the ride height devices not working. Obviously, we had Jack Miller on Saturday. He didn't actually have a ride height device problem, but he had a problem with his electronics that didn't allow him to engage his ride height device. He dropped from P4 to P21 on the run to the first corner, which is obviously extremely dangerous with that kind of closing speed. We've got problems with GP, obviously with the stuff with the front tire, the pressures. Obviously, again ties into Di Antonio getting a penalty for it. It's in a bit of a mess. We've got some of these tracks where you can't overtake. We have tracks where they're too dirty to overtake offline. We have tracks where the track surface is not used aside from MotoGP, so it's a disaster when you get there. There's some pretty big problems that MotoGP needs to solve. Stewarding as well. To be fair, we've not banged on about stewarding as much lately, but I think that's just because we've started ignoring it, just because the decisions don't make any sense. I mean, I know the Binder penalty was a bit ridiculous, controversial in a little bit, according to sort of some people. It's a kind of a bit of an argument whether what kind of penalty it was. I do think that a long lap is a bit harsh for that. I don't think it was a long lap worthy offence because Alex Marquez didn't exit the track. He did stay on the track, so I think there is an element if you've kind of got to be like, well, is that a 3-second penalty? Probably not, but it was very aggressive. But then obviously, should you be allowed to overtake somebody and then let them back through? I guess that's not really serving a drop one position penalty. I don't really have a problem with him doing it. If that's what you're allowed to do, then fair enough. But I do feel like maybe it should be a bit more robust than that. And I think it has varied over the years. I think I have seen instances where people have been told to drop 2 places once they've made a pass.
Do you remember what Pecco got in Jerez for the Miller incident? Because that was a lot less.
That was a drop one position.
Okay. There's a bit of consistency.
That shouldn't have been a penalty.
That shouldn't have been, but that's kind of under the same bracket of passing a rider, and he sat him up. There was a contact, but it's kind of in the same.
He sat up a little bit, as well. The thing is, he sat somebody up a little bit in Jerez and got a drop one position penalty. Masia literally drove his rival to rode his rival to the white line twice and didn't get anything. Which if sitting somebody up is a penalty, how is sitting them up and pushing them to the edge of the track not a penalty? I just don't understand. But yeah, there's quite a few issues, isn't there, at the minute with MotoGP?
Yeah, tires, aero, ride out devices, tracks, too long of a calendar, stewarding. They're just some of the things that, as we went to the end of the season, was kind of
no warm-up sessions.
Yeah, bad scheduling. We've seen it multiple times throughout the season where maybe you could maybe point out to the fact that we talked at the very, very start of this podcast over an hour and 53 minutes ago that the fact that there's more warm-up lap crashes, siding laps. Maybe it's because they're not having the morning warm-up, their first laps out, or
probably is actually.
Maybe it's a small percentage adding up to that. The fact is
you've got to push more on your sighting lap now to understand the bike.
Whereas exactly.
Because you've already done 20 minutes on it.
Yeah. And I think we both agree, fine, 20 minutes, 10 minutes for Moto 3, 10 minutes for Moto 2 is it's there. That time is there. The whole parade thing that they've kind of taken from F1 and try to run with. I've never been at an event since it's happened, so maybe it's great, but in terms of safety, you have to have a morning warm up for the other classes. It's not right that you're finishing your lap. I've said this so many times, broken record in this sense, where you crash in Q2, you ride your bike to the grid and you're racing, you don't know what you have underneath you really, and you're just hoping that everything that's been caught by the mechanics, that you don't have any stress fractures or anything in the bike, and if I was a Moto 3 rider and I was going to the grid after absolutely end over end wrecking a bike at the end of Q2 trying to get pole position, you'd be a bit tense. It's already tense if you're going to the grid. You're racing in 15-20 minutes. You're trying to get everything right and make sure you're hydrated, make sure that you're loose, you're in the zone, you're ready. You don't need to be thinking, right, well, I hope the front forks are okay after me bending them to bits yesterday in that crash in turn 4. And it's just another thing they don't need. 10 minutes, you'll kind of cover every box, you tick the boxes and stuff like that, and it's all they really need. And of course it'd be brilliant to have a longer warm-up, but 10 minutes either side, it would be probably 20 minutes of extra tack time between 10 minutes in the morning, maybe a 5-10 minute break, and then 10 minutes again. It's easy to find that in my eyes, 25-30 minutes. It's not that hard in my eyes to find it for me. I think where do we actually? They did have time for it elsewhere. Where did GP get like? Was it Phillip Island? Where did they get extra wet time to practice? Yeah, like an extra 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think it was Phillip Island. They did have a bit of time, didn't they?
There was an extra weekend where they basically pulled 10 minutes out of thin air, and it's proven that like if they wanted, they could. And I think it was just the
10
easy option.
minutes. Like, just start 10 minutes earlier. Like, it's not going to
Yeah.
be that much difference. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the track temperature is not going to be that much worse 10 minutes ago. Like,
Yeah,
I
it's
understand. Just do it 10 minutes before MotoGP warm up because the fan stuff's after MotoGP warm up anyway.
yeah.
Like, I just it just seems a bit silly to me. I don't know. I don't really know why they do it, to be honest.
Yeah, it's not right, but at the same time, the tires kind of go back to the issue is GP. Tire pressures, like Digi has lost a podium today. We for the last kind of 6 weeks we were coming down to the final round of the championship thinking, I hope to God Pecco doesn't lose the championship because of a tire warning pressure. I hope Martin doesn't lose the championship because of a pressure warning that ends up being a penalty. Because like from next year, like I don't think people realize that if you get a warning next year, it's a penalty.
Isn't it, next year?
Yeah, so it's you're being penalised immediately, so you have no leeway, and it's going to be the same tires. It's going to be the same. Aero's only going to get worse. I don't really know what we're going to do when it comes to that because like there's no way Dorna are going to leave 15 bikes be disqualified and we finish a race with 9 riders who were either got a terrible start and had clear air and their tires never went up, or Pecco who led from the front. Is it going to be like Pecco, Rolf Fernandez, Nakagami, and rookie Pedro Acosta finished like the first round because everyone in the mid pack tires have gone through the roof and that's all them disqualified? Like it's not right. The fact they brought in the rule told us this is going to happen from Jerez onwards, and then they got to Jerez and they're like, well, it's not really. We can't really do it yet. Oh, it's Silverstone, and it's just messy. They don't really know what to do with it themselves. I understand completely the reasoning behind the safety issue of the front tire being too low and basically failing or having stretch factors or whatever. That's fine. The right way to do it is to get the aero and the ride height devices removed back a bit so that the front tire has more load, less load, and more longevity and is less under so much load, because so many times this year there's been crashes where you just look at the ride and go like, it wasn't moving on entry. Like if you go back 10 years, 5 years, 7 years, you see a crash, you see Marcus, you see sliding in, he's really backing in, you know he's in deep, and it's just as he's getting to the very end, does chatter, he's chasing it, just see these front brake, it goes. Now you watch the MotoGP crash and it's like nothing and he's off. It's just the bikes are so glued to the ground that they're just clearly pushing so much off the edge of the tires. Gone, that's it, gone. And like we go back to Texas, we had Pecco say, I crashed because the bike was too good, and at the time he got slack, but this is exactly what he means. At the point that the fact is, bike is pulling the bike so down with all the air, all these little cavity holes they have through the bike where the air is being pulled in and being pulled down towards the ground when the bike's on the edge of the tire. But clearly there's going to be a limit between how much the track and tire can make to the point where the bike is going to go over the edge, and you'll have these crashes where you've just been going through the corner exact same speed. Now maybe you're pushing a bit, but it just feels like this year there's been so many crashes. Jorge Martin in Mandalika was another crash where it just was a weird crash, and it's a bit messy in that front. I think it all ties back to the aero now, because like Jorge Martin had to turn one today. What happens if the two of them absolutely clatter each other? Like that's 210 miles an hour they brake. Now it doesn't look it because it's so straight, and it's just for whatever reason it doesn't look it, but because turn one is so fast, they get all the way up as far as 210 miles an hour. When they're braking, if he gets sucked in, they're colliding at well over 100 miles an hour. That is a helicopter crash if I've ever seen one. The racing is not special enough. If you watch Superbikes, British Superbikes or World, pound for pound the racing's better week in, week out there. I know it's hard with their prototypes to make them race perfectly, but we had a very good kind of period of, I suppose, kind of 2010s and on up until kind of 2018, 2019, and when these front aero devices started coming in, and especially when the ride height devices, they have absolutely crippled the racing because of what they do to the bikes on corner exit and what they do on corner entry, of how they defend the rider basically. So if you make a mistake on corner entry, you can kind of get the ride height device down and kind of cover yourself up. You mightn't get a perfectly good exit, but then you can still brake deep enough where no one's out braking you, and that's, you don't really want that. And I listened to a podcast the other day with Ben Spees, and he's basically said that every track in the world, the passing zones have just gotten smaller, which means the the fine line of going over the limit is so much smaller that riders like a Maverick Vinales can't make it past. Like, and you saw in Qatar, he had so much more speed than Jorge Martin, but he just could not. No matter what he tried, he couldn't get the move done. Eventually, Martin was going so much back that he eventually managed to just about level him and get through. But it's just there's so many issues at the moment with sport that it's not where it should be. And I think for years GP was the peak, but I think now at the moment, if someone asks me, oh, I'm trying to get into bike racing, what should I watch? World Superbikes hands down is pound for pound better, more enjoyable. I think the schedule probably works a bit better. I think the whole allure and the aura of GP still pulls in, and you're getting prototype, the so-called best riders in the world, the Grand Prix product, all that, and that kind of drags in a bit, but it's I've kind of gone on long enough on the point, to the point where there's so many issues, and they're kind of all multiplying each other because one results in the other, and then that kind of makes the next one from there on out. There's quite a few issues from there, really.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it seems like we're going to be stuck with these issues for a while.
Yeah,
I do see them being addressed the next time the rules are redone. I think they are aware of it being a problem. I mean, Michelin also are very equally to blame with the manufacturers, because it's taken them a ridiculously long amount of time to develop this tyre. It shouldn't be taking them this long, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know anything about tyre development, but in the past, especially when there was the tyre war, they were chucking new tyres every weekend. Like, there's surely, like, you have all of the data, how much load in there. Even if for a season you have to bring tyres that are just really hard, that like don't overheat too much, the riders will get used to riding them. Like, I don't know exactly what how to fix it, but I think Michelin do have to take a certain level of stuff, because this has been, to be honest, basically since the back end of 21. Really, it's been an issue. Up until that point, it wasn't too bad. Obviously, we did have it occasionally in 20, but that was because they were racing in really hot conditions. Some places obviously caused the tyre temperatures to go up, but before these rider devices and stuff came in, and during that development freeze, obviously there was a big step. I think that was part of the problem, that COVID had the big development freeze. So when they came back in like sort of 22, when it was all kind of over, there was a big jump in technology. So I think that was part of the problem. But yeah, I agree with you that World Superbike actual racing is definitely better. I mean, look at what Toprak does on the brakes, for example. You can't do that on MotoGP. You could do that on MotoGP, like 5 years ago. You can't do that on MotoGP now. And that's what makes overtakes. It's all about braking. That's the most important thing. No one thinks, that when you blast past that Yamaha on the straight, that no one thinks, that was a really good overtake. Or like, if you can like floor underneath someone in a corner, that's unbelievable. But again, the aero makes the bikes turn all the same, and all the wake and stuff. You can't do that either. So yeah, just takes away all the overtake, and hopefully there can be a solution to it. But I really don't see how they are going to do it. But I think that pretty much brings us to the end.
One last point before we end.
One more point.
Jorge Martin, 18 minutes ago, Marc Marquez saw me and released the brake. So maybe I'm not too wrong in saying that he did see him and let him run around. So
there you go then.
Because if you do actually watch the onboard of Martin's bike when it's in their gravel, he gets up and starts kind of waving at Marquez, kind of like, what were you doing? At the time, I kind of felt like he just lost the championship. He kind of would, no matter who was at fault, you feel just angry at the whole situation. You kind of throw your arm at the other rider, but he's basically come out and said that Marc Marquez is having an awful evening because Bezzecchi has slated him. Guaranteed there's been words from the VR46 that side of the account as well. So it's going to be a rough couple of days for him, because Martin's come out blaming him for his crash and probably for the lack of championship. But I just wanted to kind of get that in there, just since, again, as always,
if that's breaking news right now, then yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, exactly. To end off the season with Martin already getting on Marquez's bad side, Bezzecchi on Marquez's bad side. It's going to be an interesting Ducati battle next year internally.
It's funny how the last hurrah weekend, Marquez on the Honda, so he admitted he was pushing hard to try and get a good result. He also has like 2 incidents. Pretty controversial. I did think that Marquez did seem to lean on him a little bit, but it looked like maybe he just couldn't quite see him. And Martin was a touch wide as well, so maybe he thought he left him enough room, but didn't. I mean, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how that develops then, I guess. Especially like you say, they're going to be stablemates next year, all of them, in the Ducati fold, and they'll be going to some lovely PR events, the World Ducati Day and stuff together. So if it gets a bit spicy on track next year, it could be quite good. I hope it's a good season. I really hope it's a good season. And whilst we're talking about this, do you have any final thoughts about this season and your expectations going into next year?
Expectations? I'm going to say no, because there's so much changing with Marquez on the Ducati. That's the biggest question mark we've seen in years. So it's kind of an unknown. I reckon Pecco will be better next year. I reckon it's the second year of the sprint format. I think that whole thing will change up. There's so much changing for next year. It's going to be different. To look back on this year, it's been a Ducati dominated year. The KTM have held a candle to them in some places, not much. Aprilia have misfired for most part of the season. Yamaha have been nowhere, Honda nowhere. So it's very heavily Ducati's championship at the moment, and the fact that they've all had podiums, I'm going to say. Bastianini won, Jorge Martin won, Zarco won, Pecco won, Digi won, Alex Marquez
won. They all won aside from Marini, I think. So.
It was Marini, the other one out, I was kind of going through it there. So, and he's had pole positions on like 5 podiums in the sprint. Yeah. So he's had, by no means has he had a bad season. He's still been brilliant this year too. Like, so
yeah,
just shows how good that bike is. So the question for 24 is, in terms of you're not looking at the riders more than manufacturers, who can take a bit of daylight out of Ducati, because they are head and shoulders above anyone, and probably will stay until 27 till there changes. And I suppose again this season Pecco's been brilliant. I'm going to spin this back on you. Do you think Pecco has been a deserving champion, or do you think, like, I look at Pecco thinking like that it's ended the way it probably should have? He should have won the title, barring the so-called dud tire he got in Catalonia, which kind of spiraled back half of the season kind of to be a bit rough, and him to be under a lot of pressure. I think he's held his own pretty well, and kind of from the mistake in India on, he's been pretty good, and don't think he's crashed since, has he, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's had such a good finish. I think he's definitely deserved it. Martin couldn't touch him for the first half of the season, up until obviously beat him in sack swing, and there was kind of the odd race where Martin looked good. But do you think Pecco was the deserving champion in the end? Do you think he deserved it over his full year?
Yeah, I mean, you can't really sit there and say he didn't deserve it, because like you said, the first half of the season he was unbelievable. Remember Austria, how much we were just saying he was unbelievable. We said finally he's showing that, like, because I think we were fairly in agreement that he wasn't a Rossi Marquez level rider, and we were saying this is the kind of performance that a Rossi Marquez level rider can pull out, on the days where they really have the package underneath them. And basically after that point it went downhill. So maybe if anyone's dominating next year, we need to start talking about how great they are, and maybe it'll turn things around. But yeah, he was so good in that first half of the season, obviously. He had so many rounds where he struggled on Saturday and bounced back on a Sunday. He picked up so many Grand Prix wins over the course of the season. I mean, you think about how good Martin was. He obviously managed to beat Martin. So yeah, of course he's a deserved champion. But the only caveat I have is that he made it way more difficult than it needed to be, and he made it a lot more difficult than it should have been in a as the reigning world champion on the same bike, the best bike in the factory team. Obviously he's got himself in that position by being a fantastic rider, and it's not like there aren't other people. He has a teammate in the factory team that couldn't hold a candle to him. He had Martin, who couldn't quite beat him on what is effectively the same equipment. There's probably maybe a little bit of parity, there's a little bit of a difference, but I think he still made the championship harder for himself than he should have done. If he was against a Marquez Rossi level rider, he wouldn't have won the championship. So definitely 100% deserved, but you can't forget all the crashes he had needlessly. Argentina, Texas, India. I think there was like another couple in there as well.
Le Mans as well. You could argue he could have just backed out of that instead of being too aggressive.
Yeah, so it's not been a perfect season by any means for him, but of course he's deserving of it, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who wins it really, unless it'd have to be in some very weird circumstance to say that they didn't deserve it, I think. So yeah, he definitely is a deserving champion over the year. He was more of a rounded rider than Martin. He just, I don't know. It's difficult to say. He's obviously, he's deserving champion, to answer the question. I was trying to come up with a way to, let's say, he's a more round package for Martin, and I was thinking that maybe he does feel the pressure a bit more, but clearly Martin felt the pressure, but then Martin isn't a MotoGP World Champion already. So yeah, obviously great season for Bagnaia, but certainly could have been better. And I think he'll have to take a deep look at himself going into next year, because Marquez is playing it down, but we all know that he's going to at least be fighting for wins, even if not for the championship. So you can't afford to allow him to fight for the championship, if that makes sense. Like, if he's there or thereabouts picking up the odd win, when he's on a good bike, he's not going to crash out of like fifth. He'll take fifth place or whatever, especially if he's trying to build some sort of campaign. So you can't chuck 25 points away when you're beating him. So yeah, it's going to be tricky, I think, going into next year. But yeah, it's a good point you make there to pass it back to say what are the predictions. And of course, that is the end of this season of the Motogp Xtra podcast. I mean, I think we're going to still do some post-season stuff we did last year.
Yeah,
you all seem to really enjoy it. So yeah, we haven't talked about it specifically, but I imagine we'll do a lot of the same kind of stuff. Like, I'm sure we'll do a rider ratings podcast again, another pre-season roundup, maybe something else as well, predictions, stuff like that. So yeah, hopefully you all look forward to that one. Again, like I was saying at the start of the podcast, I can't believe it's only been 2 full seasons, and we really appreciate all the support as well. And if you are listening on Spotify, please do rate 5 stars, or if you're watching on Dill's YouTube channel, do give the video a like. It just helps us out, helps more people find the podcast, and more people that can enjoy it, just like you guys, and we can get some more community involvement when we make the polls and things like that. We're going to try and maybe do a bit more of that next season, I think, as well, because, again, the reception to that has been pretty good. But yeah, I've been Rhys, he's been Dill, and enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you, I guess, whenever we do the next podcast.